Bayesian Thinking. Update beliefs with new evidence. You're sitting on your couch. The evening is quiet. Your tea is lukewarm, your cat is suspiciously missing, and your brain, ever the contrarian, decides this is the perfect time to question how you know what you know. Not in a dramatic, life-upending way, just a gentle nudge, a soft whisper that says, "What if you are wrong?" And while you are chewing on that existential biscuit, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave an existential comment. Here, you will find gentle, sleep-friendly paradoxes and brain teasers designed to entertain your neurons without setting them on fire. Now, where were we? Yes, being so wrong. Welcome to Bayesian Thinking, a method so elegant and sensible that it practically apologizes for existing in a world full of stubborn opinions and unearned confidence. This little gem of rationality teaches us one simple lesson. When you learn something new, you should probably update your beliefs. You know, like software, but without the bugs and the 20-minute restart. So, let us say you believe it is going to rain tomorrow. You pack an umbrella, wear waterproof boots, and feel smugly prepared. But then, new information, the weather app updates. It now shows a 10% chance of rain and a 90% chance of sunshine and birdsong. You could ignore it and stubbornly march out into the dry morning like a well-armored mushroom. Or you could do the Bayesian thing and update your belief. Leave the umbrella at home. Maybe even wear sunglasses. That is all Bayesian thinking is. Beliefs are not sacred relics. They are guesses, living, breathing, slightly anxious guesses, based on the information you have right now. And when that information changes, so should your guess. This may sound obvious, but it is not how most of us operate. Most people treat their beliefs like precious heirlooms, never to be touched, examined, or, heaven forbid, altered. Changing your mind? That sounds suspiciously like being wrong. And being wrong feels like showing up to a costume party that is not a costume party. In other words, social death. But Bayesian thinking says, wrong is just your brain getting a software update. And the faster you download the patch, the fewer times you trip over your own outdated expectations. Now, the name comes from Thomas Bayes, an 18th century clergyman who somehow became the patron saint of statistical humility. He cooked up a little mathematical trick, Bayes' theorem, that lets you calculate the probability of something being true based on how likely the evidence is if that thing were true. Sounds complicated? Here is the bedtime version. Belief after evidence equals belief before evidence multiplied by how likely the evidence is if your belief is true. Or to put it in more human terms, imagine you smell smoke. You think, maybe there is a fire. Then you see someone roasting marshmallows. Suddenly, your belief in the fire drops a little. More information. Updated belief. Voila. You have done Bayesian thinking. Gold star. This is not just for math nerds or scientists with suspiciously clean lab coats. It is for everyone, because life is messy. We make decisions with partial information, from dinner plans to dating apps. Bayesian thinking gives you a way to navigate that mess without clinging to the first guess your brain coughed up at 7 a.m. before coffee. Let us take a classic example: medical testing. Suppose you take a test for a rare disease. The test is 99% accurate. It comes back positive. You panic. Oh no, you think, I definitely have the disease. But hold on, that 99% is not the whole story. You also need to know how rare the disease is. If only 1 in 10,000 people has it, your positive test might still be a false alarm. Bayesian thinking helps you calculate that. It tells you not just how accurate the test is, but how likely it is to be correct, given the overall rarity. Without it, you are basically playing medical roulette with a loaded stethoscope. Or take something more relatable: dating. You go on a first date. The person is charming. They like cats. They do not interrupt you mid-sentence to talk about cryptocurrency. So you start to believe, this might work. Then you learn they think birds are not real, as in all birds are government drones. Time to update that belief. Or let us say you hear a rumor. Your favorite actor eats pasta with scissors. Sounds unlikely. But then a video surfaces, not doctored, not deep-faked. Just him, joyfully snipping tagliatelle like a man who fears forks. You might not love it, but you adjust your belief. That, dear listener, is Bayesian grace. Bayesian thinking is not about being coldly rational. It is about being honestly curious. It says, I have a model of the world. It is probably wrong, but every new clue helps me make it a little less wrong. It is not perfection. It is progress. In a way, it is the opposite of dogma. Dogma says, I know. Bayesian thinking says, I wonder. One is a brick wall. The other is a window you can open, just wide enough to let in a breeze, or an unexpected fact. Now, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, most people are naturally non-Bayesian. We double down on bad ideas like gamblers on losing streaks. We cherry-pick evidence that agrees with us and ignore everything else. We treat new facts like annoying pop-ups. Close, close, close. That is why Bayesian thinking is not just useful. It is revolutionary. It gives you permission to change your mind without losing your identity. To say, I used to think that, now I think this, and not treat it like an act of betrayal. In fact, one of the most powerful signs of intellectual honesty is being caught changing your mind in public. It is rare, it is vulnerable, it is deeply Bayesian. It says, I am not here to win arguments, I am here to improve my map. Because that is the metaphor, a map. Your beliefs are not the territory, they are just the best sketch you have made so far. You can cling to your old map and get lost, or you can grab a pen, update the roads, and maybe, just maybe, find your way home. Bayesian thinking also helps you make peace with uncertainty. It says, you do not have to be sure, just be less wrong than yesterday. It is like wearing glasses with the wrong prescription. You do not need perfect vision. You just need to see a little clearer today than you did before. And if this all sounds a bit heavy, do not worry. You are already doing it. Every time you taste food and go, needs salt, you are updating your model. Every time you check traffic before leaving for work, you are being Bayesian. Every time you say, actually, I changed my mind, you are doing a quiet, rational dance in the rain of new information. So next time you are tempted to shout, I knew it all along, pause, ask, did I really? Or did I learn something that changed my view? That is the heart of it. Now, of course, there are limits. If you change your beliefs too quickly, you become a pinball of opinion, bouncing off every headline. If you never change them at all, you become a fossil, stable, but outdated. Bayesian thinking helps you find the middle path, not gullible, not stubborn, just curious, just humble. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a world full of uncertainty, yes, but also full of opportunity. Every new fact, every new perspective is a chance to refine the picture, to get closer to truth, not in a grand, final sense, but in a quiet, daily one. And that, oddly enough, is kind of beautiful, because it means you are never finished, you are never stuck. You are just one bit of evidence away from a better version of your beliefs. And that makes every day a little adventure in epistemology, like detective work, but with fewer trench coats and more inner peace. So update your maps, redraw your lines, change your mind like it is the healthiest habit in the world. And remember, if you think you are always right, you are probably very wrong, which, come to think of it, might explain why your cat is missing. He probably disagreed with you on Bayesian priors. And speaking of priors, I used to think I could write a serious chapter without mentioning pasta scissors again. But here we are, update accepted. Motivated cognition, wanting does not make it true. Let us begin with a sentence that should be printed on every pillow in every therapist's office. Just because you want it to be true does not mean it is. Harsh? Perhaps. But reality has never been known for its gentle bedside manner. Motivated cognition is the mental equivalent of wearing rose-colored glasses, noise-canceling headphones, and a t-shirt that says, la la la, I am not listening. It is what happens when your brain decides that facts are less important than feelings. You want something to be true, so you treat it like it is true, even if all available evidence is quietly sobbing in the corner. Now imagine you are scrolling through social media. Someone posts a headline that perfectly supports your worldview. It says exactly what you believe, confirms all your suspicions, and makes your inner monologue do a little victory dance. Do you check the source? Do you pause to consider the possibility that it might be misleading, exaggerated, or sponsored by someone with a suspiciously slick haircut? Of course not. You hit like, share it with your group chat, and bask in the warm glow of confirmation. That is motivated cognition at work. It is your brain turning into a biased personal assistant. Oh, you want this to be true? Let me find 5 reasons why it is definitely true and ignore all the screaming counterexamples. The problem is, motivated cognition is not just a quirk. It is a full-blown feature of human psychology. We evolved this way. Back when saber-toothed tigers were a legitimate workplace hazard, it was more useful to make quick, emotional decisions than to sit under a tree pondering counterarguments. And while saber-toothed tigers are now mostly extinct, except on motivational posters, the wiring remains. Here is how it works in practical terms. There are 2 main ways your brain gets motivatedly ridiculous: confirmation and disconfirmation. With confirmation, you actively seek out information that supports what you already believe. You become a detective, but only for your side. If reality were a courtroom, you would be the defense lawyer, the jury, and the guy who rigged the evidence locker. With disconfirmation, you do the opposite. You find reasons to reject anything that contradicts your beliefs. Facts become suspicious. Sources are suddenly unreliable. Your reasoning becomes less about truth and more about damage control. Imagine your friend tells you, "I think your favorite actor might be kind of a jerk." Your immediate response is probably not, let me investigate that claim impartially." No, your brain screams, "Blasphemy." You Google furiously, but not to evaluate. You Google to defend. You find old interviews, charming anecdotes, and one poorly written article from 2006 that says, "He once helped a turtle cross the street. Case closed." Your beloved actor is a saint, and your friend is obviously jealous. This is not thinking. This is a courtroom drama with you playing every role except the judge. Motivated cognition infects everything: politics, relationships, career choices, favorite brands of toothpaste. It is why people stick with terrible investments, defend bad relationships, and argue that pineapple belongs on pizza with the moral fervor of a medieval crusade. But at its core, motivated cognition is about self-preservation, not physical survival, but ego survival. You do not want to be wrong. Being wrong feels like weakness. It threatens your sense of control. And so, you build a fortress of justifications, cherry-picked facts, and emotionally satisfying nonsense. You become the PR manager for your own thoughts. And do not assume this is something only other people do. You do it. I do it. Everyone does it. Even the smug guy who meditates 3 times a day and drinks mushroom tea. Especially him. Now, the truly annoying part of motivated cognition is how clever it is. It does not announce itself. It does not say, "Hey, I am about to distort your worldview because you have unresolved childhood issues." No. It disguises itself as logic. It uses big words and confident tone. It makes you feel smart, even when you are doing mental gymnastics that would impress Olympic judges. You can spot it in action by watching what people do with new information. If someone only accepts new facts when they agree with their beliefs and rejects anything that contradicts them, you are watching motivated cognition do the cha-cha. If someone shifts the goalposts, demands absurd levels of proof for things they dislike, or suddenly becomes very concerned about scientific rigor only when it suits them, congratulations, you have entered the bias zone. Even science, the supposed temple of objectivity, is not immune. Scientists are people too. They have careers, reputations, and egos the size of small moons. Motivated cognition can shape how they design studies, interpret results, or publish findings. That is why peer review exists, not because scientists are perfect, but because they are human. So, what can you do about it? First, admit you are vulnerable. That is the hardest step. Nobody wants to think of themselves as biased. It is much more comforting to imagine that your thoughts spring from pure logic and noble intent. But your brain is not a courtroom. It is a political campaign, a reality TV show, and a soap opera, sometimes all at once. Second, get curious about disagreement. When someone challenges your belief, do not immediately go on the defensive. Ask, what would I have to see to change my mind? If the answer is nothing, you are not thinking, you are cheerleading. Third, separate identity from ideas. You are allowed to be wrong. Being wrong does not make you stupid. Refusing to admit it, well, that gets closer. Treat beliefs like outfits. Try them on. See how they fit. Change them if they itch. Fourth, diversify your information diet. If you only read one kind of news, follow one type of thinker, and talk to one kind of person, your brain becomes an echo chamber. It gets flabby. You need intellectual cardio. Listen to someone you disagree with, not to mock them, to understand them. Finally, practice intellectual humility. That means saying, I do not know, more often. It means being open to revision. It means valuing truth over comfort. And yes, it means admitting that you might have been wrong about that actor, or that policy, or that weird diet involving only blueberries and coconut milk. Motivated cognition will never disappear. It is baked into the firmware. But you can learn to notice it, to laugh at it, to gently say, thanks, brain. I see what you are doing, but maybe, just maybe, I should double check. Because truth is not about what feels good. It is about what is good. It is about building a worldview that bends, adjusts, evolves, like a suspension bridge, not a brick wall. It sways in the wind, but it does not collapse. That is the kind of mind you want. Flexible, resilient, open. A mind that does not flinch when reality knocks on the door and says, hi, I brought some facts. And yes, sometimes the facts are awkward. Sometimes they are uncomfortable. Sometimes they reveal that you have been passionately defending something that makes as much sense as a square donut. But that is not failure. That is growth. Truth is not a possession. It is a process. A slow dance with evidence, uncertainty, and humility. And here is the beautiful twist. When you let go of the need to always be right, you actually get closer to being right. Because you are no longer clinging. You are listening. So next time your brain starts doing mental origami to protect a cherished belief, pause. Ask yourself, do I want this to be true more than I want to know what is true? That one question, asked sincerely, is worth more than 1,000 clever arguments. And if all else fails, remember this. The truth does not care how much you want it. It just sits there, calm, quiet, slightly judgmental, like a librarian who knows you are overdue but is too polite to say it. Also, never trust a diet that requires you to own a juicer the size of a microwave. That is not science. That is appliance-based delusion. Occam's razor. Prefer simpler explanations. You walk into your kitchen. The toaster is on the floor, your cat is sitting on the counter looking smug, and a slice of bread has been flung with suspicious accuracy into the sink. Your brain immediately fires off possibilities. Was it an earthquake? A poltergeist? Did the toaster develop artificial intelligence and stage a rebellion? Then a small, tired voice in the back of your mind whispers, maybe the cat did it. Welcome to Occam's razor, the philosophical equivalent of that voice. It is not flashy. It does not crave attention. It simply nudges you toward the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Named after William of Occam, a 14th century monk who probably never threw bread across a kitchen but definitely knew how to prune bad thinking, Occam's razor is less of a tool and more of a mental habit, a habit of cutting away excess assumptions. Razor, in this case, does not refer to shaving cream and awkward bathroom selfies, but to slicing through nonsense with precision. Here is the basic idea. If two explanations account for the same phenomenon, the one that makes fewer assumptions is generally better. Not always true, not guaranteed, but usually. Simpler explanations have fewer moving parts, fewer places to break, less chance of being made up after 3 espressos and a YouTube binge about ancient aliens. Let us say you wake up and your phone is dead. Possible explanations. You forgot to charge it. Your roommate secretly sabotaged it because they are jealous of your digital footprint. A hacker in Iceland disabled your battery as part of an elaborate cryptocurrency heist. It was eaten by a ghost. Now, Occam would say, choose the explanation that assumes the least, which in this case is probably, you forgot to charge it. Because it requires one assumption, you were forgetful, instead of an entire Netflix mini-series of betrayal and cyber espionage. Occam's razor is the ultimate anti-drama device. It looks at life's little mysteries and says, calm down. Of course, people do not like calm. People like stories, big stories, complex stories. Stories that involve villains, secret plots, and possibly government satellites shaped like owls. The more complicated an explanation, the more satisfying it feels. But just because something feels satisfying does not make it accurate. That is how conspiracy theories breed, not in darkness, but in complexity. People say things like, there must be more to the story, as if reality is legally obligated to provide bonus content. Occam would raise an eyebrow and say, there might not be. Now, some misuse Occam's razor like a philosophical mic drop. They say, this is the simplest explanation, so it must be right. But the razor does not promise truth. It offers likelihood, a helpful compass, not a crystal ball. Sometimes the simple answer is wrong, but often it is less wrong than the one involving space lizards and reverse-engineered toaster technology. Occam's razor does not mean rejecting complexity. It means rejecting unnecessary complexity. Imagine you are building a chair. You could use 4 legs, or you could build an elaborate contraption involving pulleys, magnets, and a team of small synchronized hamsters. One of those options is simpler, the other is modern furniture design. This principle is all over science. When doctors hear hoofbeats, they do not assume zebras unless you live somewhere full of zebras. They assume horses. That is Occam's razor. In medicine, it keeps diagnoses grounded. In science, it keeps theories tight. In everyday life, it stops you from turning spilled milk into a metaphysical crisis. But be careful. Simplicity can be deceptive. Some things are simple and wrong. Some things are complicated and true. Occam's razor does not ask you to be a minimalist. It asks you to be a realist. Cut what is bloated, not what is essential. Take crop circles. Some say they are made by aliens trying to communicate with wheat. Others say they are made by humans with wooden planks and too much free time. Which theory assumes less? One involves interstellar travel, language barriers, and a bizarre obsession with barley. The other involves Dave and a rope. Occam reaches for his razor, or take dreams. One explanation: your brain is sorting through recent experiences and feelings in weird, non-linear ways. Another explanation: they are messages from a mystical dimension sent by your great-aunt's ghost to warn you about your taxes. One is neuroscience. One is a Victorian seance. Even in technology, the razor rules. If your computer is slow, maybe it needs a restart. Maybe the hard drive is full. Or maybe, according to your uncle, it is being watched by the NSA because you once Googled how to cook an egg using only a magnifying glass. Again, the simplest explanation usually does not involve federal surveillance and scrambled optics. This does not mean Occam's razor is fun. Simpler explanations can feel disappointingly mundane. You want the creaking floor to be haunted. Occam says it is bad plumbing. You want to believe your dog is a genius who understands 3 languages. Occam says he is reacting to your tone and the smell of cheese. Occam is that friend who listens to your elaborate theory and replies, Or maybe he just forgot your birthday. Annoying? A little. Helpful? Absolutely. Occam's razor also applies to yourself. Why are you tired all the time? You could be suffering from a rare genetic mutation triggered by atmospheric changes. Or you could need more sleep and less screen time. Why is your project late? Not because Mercury is in retrograde or your boss secretly wants you to fail. Maybe you just underestimated how long it would take. Simpler does not mean simplistic. It means focused. It means efficient. It means not chasing fireflies with a flamethrower. Here is the irony. The more intelligent someone is, the more likely they are to overcomplicate. Smart people often fall in love with elegant but elaborate theories. Occam's razor is their cold shower. It says, "Clever is fine, but do not mistake clever for correct." Now, there is a twist. Sometimes the simpler explanation is emotionally harder to accept. Why did your relationship end? Maybe they just stopped loving you. That is simple, painful, and true. But the more comforting explanation is that they were secretly abducted by a cult that fears commitment and uses lavender oil to erase memories. Simpler does not always feel better, but it is often closer to the truth. Occam's razor is not here to comfort. It is here to clarify. It tells you that the world is not always mysterious. Sometimes it is just lazy. Sometimes your bad luck is not a curse. It is just bad timing. Sometimes people are not plotting. They are just not paying attention. There is a quiet dignity in simplicity. It allows you to focus on what matters. It frees up mental energy. It lets you move on. Occam's razor is a call to sanity, a reminder that not every shadow is a monster, not every coincidence is a sign, and not every weird sound in the night is a cryptid. Sometimes it is the fridge. So next time your brain starts spinning an intricate tale of cosmic justice, karmic vengeance, or government mind control satellites disguised as delivery drones, pause. Ask yourself, what is the most basic explanation that fits the facts? Then go with that. Unless, of course, it actually is the cat. In which case, good luck explaining the toast in the sink. Reality is surprising. Expect to be wrong. Sometimes. Let us begin with a universal truth. Life is weird. Not a little weird. Not quirky indie film weird. More like talking to yourself in the pasta aisle while a toddler throws pickles at your ankles. Weird. Reality has never signed a contract saying it must behave in a predictable or aesthetically pleasing way. And yet, for some reason, most people walk around as if the universe owes them consistency. This is where the rule comes in. Reality is surprising. Translation: expect to be wrong, regularly, enthusiastically, possibly while holding a half-eaten sandwich and trying to remember if you locked the front door. You see, the human brain, bless its enthusiastic little folds, loves patterns. It is a pattern-detecting, shortcut-making, overconfident blob of neurons. It wants things to make sense. It wants the world to behave. It wants to assume that if something happened one way yesterday, it will happen the same way tomorrow. But reality, being the chaotic roommate that it is, has other plans. One moment, the stock market is up. The next, it crashes because someone blinked in the wrong direction in a press conference. One moment, you are feeling great. The next, you eat a peanut and realize it was not a peanut. It was a rogue piece of drywall. Reality does not care about your expectations. It barely cares about logic. This is why being surprised is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is real. Let us say you walk into your living room and find your cat sitting inside a closed drawer. You did not open it. You did not hear anything. You just blink. And now she is peering out at you like she is the manager of a secret feline speakeasy. Your first reaction might be disbelief. Your second reaction should be, ah yes, reality is surprising. Or imagine you meet someone who tells you they have never heard of pizza. You ask if they are joking. They are not. They were raised on a remote island where the national dish is fermented beetroot pancakes, and cheese is considered a form of witchcraft. Surprise. The universe just handed you a reminder that your little corner of experience is not the whole map. The problem is not surprise. The problem is our aversion to it. Most people treat surprise like a glitch, a bug in the matrix. But surprise is not a malfunction. It is feedback. It is the world gently whispering, "Hey, you might want to update your assumptions." In the world of rational thinking, surprise is a good thing. It means your model of reality has encountered a data point it did not expect, which is exactly how you learn. If nothing ever surprises you, it means your beliefs are either too vague or too rigid. You are either guessing broadly enough to never be wrong, or digging in so hard that you are blind to contradiction. Either way, you are not seeing the world. You are seeing your version of the world, and calling it truth. Let us talk about Bayesian thinking for a moment. Bayesian thinkers love surprise. Surprise helps them refine their predictions. If you expect something to happen with 90% certainty, and then the opposite happens, that surprise should cause you to change your belief, not ignore it, not explain it away, update it, adjust, evolve. That is the whole point. But most people do the opposite. They treat surprise like an enemy. They say, "Well, that should not have happened," and then proceed to pretend it did not. Or they invent new explanations on the spot, just to protect their original belief. Reality bends, they say, but the ego must remain intact. This is how you get people claiming the Earth is flat, that vaccines are GPS chips, and that their favorite sports team lost because of moon energy. It is not that they are allergic to facts, it is that they are allergic to surprise. The moment reality veers left, their brains slam the steering wheel back to the right. Facts be damned. But if you can embrace surprise, lean into it even, you gain something extraordinary. Mental flexibility. The ability to admit, "I thought I knew, but apparently I did not." That is not weakness. That is strength disguised as humility. Think about science. Science is basically a structured way of being surprised for a living. Scientists build models, test hypotheses, and when something weird happens, they do not scream and flip a table. They say, "Interesting, let us poke it with a stick." Surprise is not failure. It is the path forward. Even the great scientific revolutions were born from people expecting one thing and getting another. Newton did not sit under the apple tree expecting gravity to invent itself. Darwin did not sail around the world thinking, "I bet I am about to fundamentally alter our understanding of biology." These people were surprised, repeatedly. And then they asked, "What does this mean?" In everyday life, the same principle applies. You might expect your job to be stable. Surprise. Layoffs. You might expect your car to start. Surprise. It sounds like a dying blender. You might expect your date to love classical music. Surprise. They think Mozart was a sandwich. Now, you could get angry. You could pout and shout about how the world should be more predictable. Or you could say, "Apparently, I need to revise my expectations." This shift, from indignation to curiosity, is the hallmark of a rational mind. Let us take a more personal example. Say you are certain your friend would never forget your birthday. Then they do. You feel hurt, confused, betrayed. But reality has surprised you. Now you have a choice. Do you decide they are a terrible person? Or do you consider the possibility that your belief was too confident, that maybe there is more going on, that your model of the friendship needs a patch? Expecting to be wrong sometimes is not a sign of low self-esteem. It is a sign of intellectual maturity. It means you have stopped confusing certainty with strength. It means you have accepted that knowledge is provisional, that truth, while real, is rarely served with a side of total clarity. And yes, it is uncomfortable. Nobody likes being wrong. But being wrong is how you get closer to being right. It is not an insult, it is a breadcrumb, a clue. A moment to pause and ask, what just happened here, and why was I surprised? Children do this all the time. They are professional surprise absorbers. Drop a toddler into a room, and within seconds, they are pulling on wires, opening drawers, and licking the couch. Why? Because everything is surprising, everything is new, and rather than reject it, they explore it. Adults, on the other hand, become allergic to surprise. They get locked into routines, opinions, predictions. They want the same breakfast, the same opinions, the same traffic patterns. When something changes, they panic. They scream into their coffee. They blame the news, the weather, or Mercury being in retrograde. But surprise is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is your opportunity to grow beyond the stale little echo chamber you built for yourself. So, how do you practice this? You start by noticing your emotional reaction to surprise. That flash of confusion, the itch of frustration. When you feel it, pause. Ask yourself, what did I assume and why was I so sure? Then dig. Challenge the assumption. Be curious. Be gentle. But do not dismiss it. Keep a mental list of moments when reality surprised you. Look for patterns. Maybe you are too confident in your time estimates. Maybe you assume people think like you. Maybe you expect your plants to water themselves. Whatever it is, surprise will highlight the blind spots in your thinking, if you let it. In the end, expecting to be wrong sometimes is a bit like carrying an umbrella on a sunny day. You might not need it. But if the sky cracks open, you will be glad you were not the kind of person who said, "Rain, impossible." Because life is not a spreadsheet, it is not a flowchart. It is a live performance with bad lighting, surprise cameos, and a script that keeps rewriting itself when you are not looking. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most surprising thing of all is discovering that your cat has figured out how to operate the toaster again. Notice confusion. Confusion is a signal. You are standing in a room. Someone is explaining something. Maybe it is a teacher, a colleague, or that one friend who always talks like a Wikipedia article with a caffeine addiction. They are saying words. You understand the individual words, but somewhere between the nouns and the acronyms, your brain quietly decides to exit the conversation and stare at an imaginary spot on the wall. You smile, you nod, you pretend, but inside, you are deeply, profoundly, almost artistically confused. This is where our next rationality rule comes in. Notice confusion. That moment when your mental gears stop turning and start emitting smoke, that is not a glitch. That is not your brain being broken. That is your brain trying to tell you something important. Confusion is not a failure of intelligence. It is a signal. And like most important signals in life, it arrives uninvited, at the worst possible time. Usually when you are trying to look clever in front of someone who uses the phrase, synergize vertical bandwidth, without irony. The problem is not confusion itself. The problem is what people do when they feel it. Most people panic. They shut down. They pretend they understand. They nod with the enthusiasm of a bobblehead in a wind tunnel and hope no one asks them to explain anything. Others, slightly more confident, bulldoze through confusion like a tourist refusing to admit they are lost. They keep moving forward, even if their mental map currently resembles a spaghetti diagram drawn by a sleep-deprived octopus. But the rational approach, it starts with noticing. When you feel confusion, do not ignore it. Do not bury it under more words or more coffee. Pause. Name it. I do not understand this. There. That is the beginning of clarity. Because confusion is not the problem. Confusion is the clue. It is the blinking red light on your dashboard that says, something here does not fit. Your model of the world just encountered a glitch in the matrix. You can either explore it or pretend you saw nothing and hope you do not crash. Let us take an example. You read a headline. Quantum entanglement disproves reality. Your brain recoils. What? You try to read the article. It throws words like decoherence, wave function collapse, and spooky action at a distance. Somewhere around paragraph 3, you start thinking about snacks. That moment, when your attention drifts, your thoughts scatter, and you begin to smile blankly, is your confusion alarm going off. You may not understand the physics, but you do understand the feeling. Something is happening, and you are not tracking it. Now here is the trick. Do not fake it. Do not shrug and say, Yeah, I get it. Instead say, wait, what does that mean? Dig, ask, find the missing piece. Confusion is your brain's way of asking for a better explanation. This rule applies everywhere. You hear a politician use the word inflationary pressure on macroeconomic fundamentals. You feel confused. Do not assume the problem is you. Ask, what does that actually mean? Could this person explain it using pancakes and monopoly money? Or you are in a meeting. Someone says, the KPI delta over Q3 does not reflect the pivot synergy in our agile backlog. Everyone nods. You feel lost. That is your moment. Raise a hand, internally or literally, and ask, do we actually know what those words mean? Or are we collectively auditioning for a TED Talk that forgot its point? People often confuse being confused with being stupid. But confusion is not stupidity. Stupidity is when you do not understand and you do not care. Confusion is when you do care and something still does not add up. That is not a flaw. That is the start of insight. Let us shift gears. You are watching a magic trick. The magician places a coin in one hand, closes it, and opens it again to reveal nothing. The coin is gone. You are surprised. But more importantly, you are confused. How did that happen? Your brain says, I saw the coin. I saw it go into the hand. Where did it go? That is your model of reality encountering a contradiction. You thought you understood how objects behave. Now the magician has shown you that you do not. Your confusion is not a mistake. It is the exact moment where your brain tries to fix the model. Update needed, it says. This is what great scientists do. They notice confusion, they chase it. Newton saw an apple fall and asked, why down? Why not sideways? Why not up? That question led to gravity. Darwin noticed finches with weird beaks. He asked, why are they different? That led to evolution. Confusion is not the absence of understanding. It is the seed of discovery. But here is the catch. Most people do not chase confusion. They hide from it. They are afraid it will expose them, make them look foolish. So they laugh, change the subject, or pretend to know what is going on while internally screaming into a mental void. This fear is deeply irrational. Everyone gets confused. Everyone has moments where reality says, you sure about that, buddy? The difference between rational and irrational thinkers is not how often they get confused. It is how they respond to it. Rational thinkers treat confusion like a puzzle. What is missing? They ask. What assumption am I making that might be wrong? That question, simple, honest, unpretentious, is the beginning of wisdom. You might be wondering, why do I not notice my confusion more often? Because modern life has trained you not to. The internet rewards confidence, not curiosity. News outlets shout certainty. Social media thrives on hot takes, not quiet doubt. Everyone is busy being right. Nobody stops to say, hold on, that does not make sense. But the most powerful words in any intelligent conversation are not, I am right. They are, that is odd. Oddness is your signal. Confusion is your entry point. That strange moment when something does not click. That is where growth lives. That is where learning begins. Here is another example. Say someone claims that vaccines cause people to become magnetic. You hear this. You tilt your head. Your brain does not scream, wrong. It whispers, wait. What? That whisper is confusion. And confusion, when noticed, becomes investigation. You ask questions. You look for data. You pull at the thread. Or maybe you see a statistic that says 94% of people agree with something that you have never even heard of. Your first reaction should not be shame. It should be curiosity. If that is true, why am I just now hearing it? What does that number mean? What assumptions are baked into that claim? Confusion is not the enemy. Certainty without evidence is. And here is the deeper truth. Most things worth knowing begin in confusion. If an idea never confuses you, it is probably either too simple or too familiar. Confusion means you are touching the edge of what you know. And edges are where the interesting stuff happens. So the next time you feel that flicker of confusion, pause. Do not run from it. Do not mask it with jargon. Do not bury it under fake agreement. Ask the question. Admit you do not understand. Follow the confusion like it is a trail of breadcrumbs through the forest of your assumptions. You will be amazed at what you find. And if you ever feel embarrassed about being confused in front of others, just remember, there is always someone nearby who is also confused, but pretending harder. They are the person nodding slowly while Googling what is synergy under the table. Disconfirmation bias. Look for ways you are wrong. Let us start with something truly heroic, admitting that you might be wrong. No medals are awarded. No parades are held. There is no statue erected in your honor. But in the world of rational thought, recognizing the possibility that you are incorrect is the intellectual equivalent of lifting a car off a baby. Rare, awkward, and deeply impressive. Enter the beast known as disconfirmation bias. It sounds technical, but it is just your brain being emotionally attached to its own bad ideas. Simply put, disconfirmation bias is what happens when you give more scrutiny, doubt, and general side-eye to information that challenges your beliefs than you do to information that supports them. It is a double standard, and it is a sneaky one. Your brain does not come right out and say, "I will ignore this because it contradicts my worldview." No, that would be honest. Instead, it says things like, "This source seems questionable," or "That is just one study," or "Well, I am sure there is more to the story." Meanwhile, any evidence that agrees with you gets ushered through security like a VIP at a nightclub. You become the mental equivalent of a nightclub bouncer with a clipboard that says, "Confirmation bias, let in." Disconfirmation bias. Ask to wait outside while we verify credentials. Imagine this. You believe that eating 12 almonds a day prevents migraines. You saw a documentary. The narrator sounded very confident. Your cousin tried it once and said she felt something. Then one day you come across a study that says, almonds have no proven effect on migraines. How do you respond? A. Interesting. I will reevaluate my position in light of this new evidence. B. This study must be funded by Big Pharma, which hates almonds. C. Well, the study only had 200 people, and maybe they ate the wrong kind of almonds, possibly bitter ones. I need more research. If your instinct leans toward B or C, congratulations. You are normal, and you are demonstrating disconfirmation bias in its natural habitat. You see, humans have a long, storied history of protecting their beliefs like they are rare collectibles. Once you have invested time, identity, or emotion into an idea, letting go of it feels like throwing away a beloved heirloom, even if it is a plastic trinket from a cereal box. Disconfirmation bias is not about logic. It is about comfort. It is easier to poke holes in the arguments that make you uncomfortable than to seriously question the ones that make you feel smart, safe, or superior. But rationality, annoying and noble as ever, asks you to flip the script. Instead of spending all your energy reinforcing what you already think, rationality asks, what would it take to prove me wrong? This is not just a mental exercise. This is a discipline, a skill, a habit that separates thinkers from parrots. You know parrots. They repeat the same lines over and over with no idea what they mean. And no offense to parrots, but they are not exactly running philosophy departments. Let us break it down. You believe something. Fine. Ask yourself, what kind of evidence would challenge this belief? Am I willing to seriously consider that evidence? Do I apply the same level of skepticism to evidence I like as I do to evidence I dislike? If the answer to that last one is no, then welcome to the club. Most people are emotionally allergic to contradiction. But if you can train yourself to lean into discomfort, if you can develop the habit of asking, what if I am wrong? You are already ahead of 97% of humanity. Now let us look at how this plays out in real life. Let us say you are convinced your favorite tech company is the most innovative in the industry. You read glowing reviews. You watch keynotes. You own every product, including the one that was basically just a glorified coaster with Bluetooth. Then you read a detailed critique that says this company actually recycles old ideas and relies on marketing hype. Disconfirmation bias says, this article is biased. Rational thinking says, let me see if their points hold up. Or take politics. You believe your side is the rational one, the moral one, the grown-up one. You see a video that shows your political idol saying something painfully dumb. Disconfirmation bias says, that is out of context. Rationality says, let me find the context. And if it is just as bad, I should factor that in. Now, this does not mean that every criticism is valid. Some critiques are nonsense. But disconfirmation bias is not about agreeing with every argument. It is about considering them honestly. Giving them a fair trial instead of dismissing them before the evidence has even taken the stand. There is a mental trick you can use here. It is called Steelmanning, where you try to make the best version of the argument that opposes your belief. Not a straw man, not the dumbest, weakest version that you can easily knock down, but the strongest version, the one that actually challenges you. If you can do that, if you can look at a belief you disagree with and say, here is the best case for it, then you are thinking like a rationalist. You are not building walls, you are building understanding. Here is the kicker. Most people do not even realize they have disconfirmation bias. They think they are being logical. They think they are just asking the tough questions when those questions are aimed only at ideas they dislike. But true skepticism does not play favorites. It is not about defending your team. It is about defending the truth, even when it is inconvenient, messy, or deeply awkward at family dinners. Let us take another example. You believe that sugar causes hyperactivity in children. You read it in a parenting blog. You saw a kid eat a cupcake and then run into a wall. Seems obvious. Then someone shows you a dozen studies saying there is no consistent evidence for sugar-induced hyperactivity. Disconfirmation bias says, those studies must have been done with the wrong children. Rationality says, maybe I was wrong. Maybe kids are just naturally chaotic, like raccoons with tiny backpacks. Notice how disconfirmation bias often disguises itself as skepticism. It sounds like critical thinking, but it is selective. It zooms in on flaws when it disagrees and zooms out when it agrees. That is not logic. That is a double standard wearing a lab coat. Here is the good news. Once you learn to notice disconfirmation bias, you can start catching it, like a leaky faucet. You hear the drip, you trace it back, you tighten the valve. When you read something you disagree with, pause. Ask, am I being fair? Would I demand this level of proof if I agreed with the conclusion? That moment, right there, is the battlefield of intellectual honesty. And here is the bonus. Questioning yourself does not make you weaker. It makes you more trustworthy. People respect those who can say, I used to think X, but I changed my mind. It signals humility, courage, and curiosity. Plus, it is contagious. When you show others that changing your mind is not shameful, it gives them permission to do the same. That is how culture shifts. Not with shouting, with thoughtful people modeling better thinking. So the next time you are confronted with evidence that threatens your precious beloved opinion, pause. Do not dismiss, do not rationalize. Sit with the discomfort, ask the hard questions. And if you find out you were wrong, congratulations, you just leveled up. You are no longer protecting a belief, you are pursuing the truth. And if that truth means admitting that 12 almonds a day do not, in fact, cure migraines, well, you can always eat them for the fiber and pretend that was the plan all along. After all, you cannot go wrong with almonds, unless you are a squirrel with commitment issues. Argument, not authority. Trust logic, not titles. You are at a dinner party. Someone starts a debate about whether time is real or just an illusion invented by wristwatch companies. You have opinions, so does everyone else. Then one person clears their throat and says, well, I have a PhD in theoretical physics. Everyone nods, falls silent, and immediately accepts whatever that person says as gospel. Why? Because they have a title. This, dear reader, is what we call appealing to authority. And this chapter is here to gently, lovingly, and with just a hint of sarcasm, help you stop doing that. Let us be clear. Expertise matters, knowledge matters, experience matters. But when it comes to rational thinking, none of those things get to override the actual argument being made. Titles are not trump cards. Degrees are not force fields. And just because someone has been doing something for 30 years does not mean they have been doing it right for 30 years. The rule here is simple. Evaluate the argument, not the person making it. You might be thinking, but what about doctors, scientists, engineers? Yes, those people are trained. They probably know more than the average person. But training does not guarantee truth. Experts can be wrong. Experts can disagree with each other. Experts can also go completely off the rails and start believing that the moon is a projection created by underground lizard governments. Being an expert in one field does not make someone infallible in all fields. There is a reason nobody asks their dentist for investment advice. Hopefully. Let us take an example. A Nobel Prize-winning chemist says, "Vaccines are part of a global plot to implant microchips into your bloodstream." Now, your brain might freeze. But they are smart, it protests. They won a prize. They are wearing a lab coat. Still, stop. Breathe. Ask, what is the actual evidence for that claim? Do not be hypnotized by the shiny credentials. Focus on the logic. If the argument does not hold up without the person's name attached, it probably does not hold up at all. Appealing to authority is a comforting shortcut. It saves time. It feels safe. After all, who wants to double-check the reasoning behind every claim when you can just say, "This came from someone with a beard, glasses, and 10 letters after their name"? But rationality asks for more. It asks you to look past the glitter and inspect the gears. If someone makes a claim, ask, what is the evidence? Does the logic follow? Could someone without a title have made the same point and still sounded convincing? Because here is the brutal truth. Even the smartest people can believe dumb things. In fact, they are sometimes better at rationalizing nonsense because they are more skilled at arguing. Intelligence does not make someone more correct. It just makes their mistakes more elaborate. Consider Isaac Newton, brilliant man, revolutionized science. Also spent an absurd amount of time trying to turn lead into gold and decipher ancient prophecies from the Book of Revelation. Genius does not immunize against nonsense. Or take Sigmund Freud. Founded psychoanalysis, introduced groundbreaking ideas, also believed most of your problems came from wanting to marry your mother. Authority does not equal accuracy. So how do you navigate this? First, respect expertise. Do not throw it out. But do not treat it like a golden ticket either. Experts deserve to be heard, but their arguments still need to make sense. If an astrophysicist says the Earth is flat, you do not nod politely. You ask questions. Second, separate person from point. If someone says something that sounds true, do not assume they are smart. If someone says something that sounds wrong, do not assume they are stupid. Evaluate the statement, not the speaker. Third, watch out for second-hand authority. That is when someone says, "Well, this expert said so," and uses that as the end of the discussion. It is fine to cite sources, but if you cannot explain the reasoning behind the expert's claim, then you are not standing on an argument. You are standing on a cardboard cutout of someone smarter than you, and it is going to collapse in the rain. You can also look out for false authority. That is when someone has credentials that sound impressive, but are completely unrelated to the topic. The CEO of a tech company might be great at building apps, but that does not mean you should listen to their opinions on climate science, epidemiology, or how to fix your lower back pain. We live in a world that worships credentials. LinkedIn bios are longer than most short stories. People collect certificates like Pokemon cards. But rationality is not impressed by job titles. Rationality wants content. Rationality wants logic. It is also worth noting that some of the most important truths in history were first spoken by people with no authority at all. People who were ignored, ridiculed, or dismissed. until their arguments turned out to be right. Galileo, Ignaz Semmelweis, Rachel Carson. None of them were invited to the big table at first. They got there by building good arguments, not by flashing titles. The flip side of this is also dangerous. People can use their authority to manipulate. They can speak confidently, drop jargon, and wrap their claims in the velvet robe of expertise, hoping you will not look too closely. Do not fall for it. Look closely. Let us play a little game. Imagine two people are making the same claim. Person A, high school dropout, speaks in plain language, has a graph and a solid explanation. Person B, Ivy League professor, speaks in dense jargon, has no data, just a very stern voice. Who do you believe? If your answer is B, obviously, then you are not thinking rationally. You are outsourcing your thinking to a resume. The right move is to ask, which person has the stronger argument? Now, this does not mean you should treat everyone equally. A random person on the internet is not equal to a scientist who has been studying a topic for 20 years. But the scientist still needs to explain things clearly. If their argument only makes sense when delivered with a PowerPoint and Latin etymology, be cautious. The key here is transparency. A good argument should make sense no matter who delivers it. The truth does not need a costume. It stands up on its own. That is why science uses peer review, replication, and open data. Because the identity of the speaker should not matter. What matters is whether the idea holds up under scrutiny. This principle also applies in everyday life. When your boss says, "Because I said so," that is not an argument. That is a request for obedience. When your friend says, "This documentary changed my life," ask what the argument was. When your uncle says, "I have been on this earth longer than you," ask if that time was spent listening or just talking louder. Authority is a useful signal, but it is not a final answer. And blind trust is not a virtue. It is a shortcut to being manipulated by the loudest person in the room. So listen to experts, but never stop asking, why is this true? Because at the end of the day, the only authority that really matters is reason itself. And if reason ever starts a YouTube channel, hopefully it skips the intro and gets straight to the graphs. Otherwise, people are just going to click away after the second minute and go watch a dog play the piano. Which, to be fair, still makes more sense than trusting a chiropractor for quantum physics advice. Specificity Principle. Avoid vagueness. You are sitting in a meeting. The presentation slide says, "Optimize user experience by leveraging synergies across the vertical." You nod slowly. Everyone nods slowly. Someone even says, "Brilliant." But deep inside, every brain in the room is quietly screaming, what does that actually mean? Welcome to the realm of vagueness, where words look impressive, sound professional, and mean absolutely nothing. This chapter is about escaping that fog, sharpening your thoughts, and embracing the golden rule of clarity. Be specific or be useless. This is the specificity principle, and it exists for a simple reason. Vague ideas cannot be tested. Vague predictions cannot be proven wrong, and vague statements cannot be trusted, because they give you nothing to hold on to. They are the cognitive equivalent of grabbing a handful of mist and then acting like you are holding a map. Let us break it down. If someone tells you, things are going to improve, ask yourself, what things? Improve how? By when? Compared to what? If you cannot answer those questions, what you have is not an insight, it is a horoscope. The danger of vagueness is that it feels safe. Specific claims can be falsified. They can be challenged. They can be embarrassingly wrong. But vague ones? Vague ones just float above criticism, like helium balloons filled with buzzwords and evasive optimism. Imagine this. You ask a psychic what your year will look like. They say, "I see great change ahead, possibly connected to your personal or professional life. A transition will occur." You walk away amazed. Then 3 months later you get a haircut and a new coffee mug and think, wow, they were right. That is vagueness in action. Say enough cloudy things and something will eventually match the weather. Now flip it. You ask a meteorologist what the weather will be like on Tuesday. They say, light rain between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., tapering off by sunset, winds at 10 miles per hour. That is a testable, specific claim. If it turns out to be wrong, you can measure it, you can learn from it, you can hold it accountable. That is the power of specificity. It is vulnerable, but honest. In rational thinking, the specificity principle says, the more precise your claim, the more useful it is. Specific claims can be debated. They can be improved. They can evolve. Vague ones just sit there, smug and shapeless, like a motivational poster that forgot what it was motivating. Let us say your friend says, I am going to get healthy. Sounds great. You ask, how? They reply, you know, just healthier. That is vagueness. Now imagine they say, I am going to stop drinking soda, walk 5 kilometers every morning, and eat vegetables at lunch for the next 30 days. Suddenly, you have something real, something measurable, something that, if it fails, will fail honestly. Specificity is not just about communication. It is about thinking. Vague thoughts lead to vague actions. Specific thoughts lead to clarity, accountability, and actual improvement. You cannot improve what you cannot define. In the world of predictions, specificity separates fortune tellers from forecasters. A fortune teller says, big things are coming. A forecaster says, Q2 sales will rise by 8% due to increased seasonal demand and promotional offers. One makes you feel excited, the other makes you plan accordingly. And let us not forget politics. Politicians are masters of vagueness. They say things like, we will restore dignity, create opportunity, and build a better future for all. What does that mean? Is there a blueprint, a to-do list, or just a thesaurus with ambition issues? If someone says, we will increase economic growth, ask, by how much, in what sectors, over what time frame, compared to what baseline? If they squirm, you are not dealing with a plan, you are dealing with a slogan. Specificity forces people to commit, and commitment is scary, because once you specify something, people can hold you to it. That is why so many discussions stay vague. Vagueness is the warm bath of intellectual conversation. It feels nice, but you are not getting anywhere. Even in relationships, vagueness is a minefield. Imagine your partner says, I just need more. More what? Time? Space? Hugs? Pancakes? A parrot? The conversation does not move forward until someone breaks out the dictionary and starts asking pointed questions. Let us try a few examples to see how this plays out. Vague. Artificial intelligence is changing everything. Specific. Natural language processing models are replacing customer service roles in companies with more than 500 employees. Vague. The economy is unstable. Specific. Over the past 12 months, inflation has increased by 3.2%, while wage growth has stagnated in the retail sector. Vague. I am working on a project. Specific. I am building a budgeting app for freelancers using Python and Firebase, targeting beta launch by October. See the difference? One is conversation filler. The other is information. Even your goals benefit from specificity. I want to write more becomes, I will write 500 words every morning before checking my phone. That kind of clarity does not just improve your chances. It creates momentum. It lets you track progress. It gives your brain a to-do list instead of a vague existential nudge. In fact, specificity is the key to debugging your own life. Feeling anxious? Instead of saying, I feel off, try, I felt nervous after that meeting because I was not clear on the deadline, and I think I embarrassed myself. That level of detail lets you act. It breaks the spell of undefined stress. Now, let us be honest. Specificity is not always fun. It takes effort. It forces you to slow down and clarify, but it is worth it. Because vagueness is a breeding ground for confusion, misunderstanding, and terrible decisions. Let us say you are shopping for a laptop. The salesperson says, this one is really fast. That tells you nothing. Fast compared to what? Running which programs? Using what processor? Or worse, someone tells you a statistic. Most people prefer this model. Ask them, what does most mean? 70%? 51? Did you survey 5 people in your office or 30,000 across the country? Numbers, like words, need precision. Otherwise, they are just math-flavored decorations. And then there is the classic trap, strategic vagueness. People sometimes avoid being specific because they know the specifics will sound ridiculous. If you are trying to sell snake oil, you do not say, this product contains 10% mint, 5% vinegar, and 90% regret. You say, it supports natural wellness through proprietary botanical blends. Specificity is a filter. It exposes nonsense. That is why people who sell questionable ideas often run from specifics like they are allergic to them. You can use this to your advantage. When someone makes a claim that sounds fishy, ask for details. If they resist, rephrase, can you give me an example? Can you be more specific? If they still cannot, you are probably dealing with a rhetorical fog machine. And yes, sometimes life is messy and cannot be neatly labeled. That is fine. But when you are trying to understand, explain, or improve something, specificity is your flashlight in the fog. It does not eliminate complexity. It lets you navigate it. So the next time someone tries to impress you with a vague insight, ask yourself, is this helping me understand something, or is it just word salad with croutons of confidence? And if all else fails, remember this. If your weather app said, probably some weather, maybe soon, you would delete it. Be the app that says, light drizzle, west wind, bring a jacket. Even if you end up being wrong, at least you were wrong with style, conviction, and a very specific umbrella. Privileging the hypothesis. Do not assume without evidence. Let us imagine, for a moment, that you are walking through the forest. The air is crisp, the trees are tall, you hear a rustle in the bushes. Now you could assume it is a squirrel. You could assume it is the wind. Or if you are feeling dramatic, you could assume it is a time-traveling velociraptor here to warn you about an ancient prophecy involving gluten. The point is, you have choices. But if you immediately leap to the most exciting, emotionally satisfying, or conspiracy-adjacent explanation without checking whether you have any reason to believe it, congratulations, you have just privileged a hypothesis. And yes, it sounds fancy. Privileging the hypothesis. It has the tone of a phrase that should be spoken in a mahogany-paneled room by someone with elbow patches. But all it really means is starting with a conclusion you like and then trying to force the facts to match it, instead of letting the evidence guide you to a conclusion. This is not a rare mistake. This is an everyday mistake. It happens in casual conversations, breaking news stories, scientific debates, and Reddit threads about lizard people living in the Denver airport. Let us start with a simple example. You see a strange light in the sky. Someone nearby says, "That is a UFO." You nod. You feel excited. You take a picture that somehow looks like it was taken by a nervous potato. Later you find out it was a weather balloon, or a drone, or Venus doing what Venus does. But your mind already gave the UFO theory a head start. You privileged that hypothesis. Here is what makes it dangerous. The moment you give one hypothesis special treatment, just because it is cool or familiar or dramatic, you become blind to all the other possibilities. You stop evaluating. You start defending. This is how bad reasoning gets a foot in the door. Once a favored hypothesis sneaks in, it becomes the default. Everything else has to work harder to catch up, even if it is better supported, even if it makes more sense. You have already emotionally invested in the first idea, like naming a stray cat and then pretending it is not living in your kitchen. Privileging the hypothesis shows up a lot in pseudoscience. Someone says, "I have a headache and Mercury is in retrograde, therefore astrology works." They did not ask whether there were other explanations: stress, lack of sleep, possibly yelling at an Excel spreadsheet for 6 hours. They started with their favorite answer and stuck with it. But this mistake is not limited to horoscopes and mystery lights. It sneaks into relationships too. Let us say your friend did not respond to your message. You immediately assume they are mad at you. You do not ask. You do not consider that they might be busy or asleep or trapped in an elevator with no signal and a raccoon. You just privilege your pet hypothesis. They hate me. And now every new detail gets interpreted through that lens. They used a period instead of an emoji? Definitely mad. They liked a post but did not text back? Obviously seething with rage. You are not looking for truth. You are looking for evidence to support the conclusion you already like or fear. This is the problem. Privileging a hypothesis shifts the burden of proof. You are no longer asking, which explanation makes the most sense? You are asking, how can I make this one look convincing? Let us shift to the world of science. Good science generates multiple hypotheses and tests them all fairly. Bad science privileges one from the start. Imagine a study where researchers set out to prove that eating pickles improves memory. They do not look at alternative explanations. They do not consider confounding variables. They just serve pickles, ask a few trivia questions, and declare victory. Did the pickles help? Did the participants just like pickles and try harder to please the researchers? Was the control group distracted by a guy eating pickles too loudly in the corner? If you privilege the hypothesis from the start, you never find out. You are too busy drawing pickle-shaped conclusions. The rational approach. Do not play favorites. Treat all reasonable explanations with equal skepticism. Let the evidence speak first. Let reality cast the roles. If one explanation turns out to be stronger, great. But do not give it a crown before the audition. You see this mistake all over journalism. A crime happens. A theory goes viral. It was an inside job. Suddenly, every article starts from that assumption. Every interview is framed around that idea. New facts get filtered through the hypothesis that has already been unofficially declared king. By the time the real evidence shows up, the public has already moved on. Because the first hypothesis got all the attention. Yeah. It is like starting a race by giving one runner a 50-meter head start because they have a cool backstory. Even everyday decisions are vulnerable. You are buying a car. You see a model you like. You tell yourself it is reliable, economical, and great in the snow, even though it has 3 stars on safety, costs more than it should. And your cousin crashed the same model into a lemonade stand last summer. But you like the look, you like the name. You decided first and justified second. That is how privileging the hypothesis works. It feels like thinking, but it is really just decoration. Your brain builds a lovely little display around a conclusion it already liked. Logic is not the driver, it is the butler, polishing the idea and serving it drinks. So how do you fix this? You start by noticing when you are jumping to conclusions. Ask yourself, am I testing this idea or protecting it? Next, generate multiple hypotheses. Not just one, not just your favorite. If your computer crashes, do not assume it is because the universe hates you. Consider overheating, bad drivers, malware, user error. Be democratic with your suspicion. Then, ask, what would convince me this idea is wrong? This question is a sharp little dagger against cherished but unsupported beliefs. If you cannot answer it, if your idea is unfalsifiable, it is not a hypothesis. It is a security blanket. And do not forget to weigh the evidence, not just count it. One solid piece of disconfirming evidence is more important than 10 vague rumors that fit your preferred theory. If you are trying to determine whether your new water filter actually improves taste, trust your blind taste test more than your desire to justify the expense. Also, beware of storytelling bias. Humans love stories. We want villains, heroes, twists. But reality often lacks plot structure. Privileging the hypothesis turns every confusing event into a personal narrative, and not a good one. More like a fan fiction with terrible pacing and very few facts. Even in heated arguments, this rule applies. If someone says they are lying because they are guilty, stop. That is the hypothesis. Ask, Is there any other reason someone might lie? Fear, pressure, bad memory. Start from a place of curiosity, not certainty. Because once you privilege a hypothesis, you stop looking. And once you stop looking, you stop learning. Let us bring this home with a quick mental checklist. Did you consider multiple explanations? Are you favoring one just because it feels right? Are you using evidence to discover the truth or decorate your favorite idea? If the answer to the last one is decorate, then congratulations, you are not reasoning. You are doing intellectual interior design, and you might want to put down the throw pillows and pick up some actual data. So the next time you hear something that sounds too neat, too clean, or too emotionally satisfying, take a beat. Ask yourself, am I thinking or just settling? Because the truth is rarely the first idea you fall in love with. And if it turns out the rustling in the forest was not a velociraptor, but just a very judgmental squirrel, well, at least now you know which hypothesis to keep in your emergency notebook, preferably in pencil. Probabilistic thinking, degrees of belief, not certainties. You are flipping a coin. You say, heads. It lands on tails. You groan, shake your fist at the heavens, and declare the universe unfair. Meanwhile, someone nearby calmly shrugs and says, well, it was always 50-50. That person is either a rationalist or just very good at sucking the drama out of coin tosses. Either way, they are using something called probabilistic thinking, the art of dealing with uncertainty like a grown-up. Most people walk around thinking in absolutes. This is true. That is false. He is definitely lying. She is always late. The world is ending. The soup is ruined. But rationality has no time for dramatic declarations or emotional absolutes. Rationality wants degrees of belief. It wants you to say things like, I am 70% confident it will rain today, instead of, it is definitely going to pour, while wearing sandals and forgetting an umbrella. Probabilistic thinking is not glamorous. You do not see it in action movies. No hero says, there is a 42% chance this door is booby-trapped, but I am willing to take the risk. No one in a political debate says, there is a moderate probability that my opponent has a point. But in the real world, where outcomes are messy, data is incomplete, and humans are complicated meat puzzles, thinking in probabilities is the best way to stay sane. Let us begin with the basics. Probabilistic thinking means recognizing that almost nothing is 100% certain or 0% certain. Instead, things exist on a spectrum of likelihood. That does not mean you cannot act. It just means you act while knowing you might be wrong. You do not say, this restaurant is amazing. You say, based on 3 good meals and 1 weird waiter who called me captain, I estimate an 80% chance of having a good experience here again. You do not say, the stock market will crash. You say, given current indicators, there is a 25% chance of a major correction within the next 6 months. That is not wishy-washy. That is honest. It reflects the reality that you are not omniscient. You are just a pattern-recognizing biped making bets in a casino run by entropy. Now, here is the uncomfortable part. Most people hate thinking this way. Why? Because probabilities do not feel satisfying. Certainty feels satisfying. Saying, I know what is going to happen, gives you a dopamine hit. It gives you the illusion of control. It makes you sound confident, especially on television. But saying, I am 63% sure, just makes people tilt their heads and slowly back away. Still, if your goal is accuracy, not applause, you need to embrace probabilistic thinking. It makes you better at forecasting, better at decision-making, and much better at surviving conversations with people who speak in all caps. Let us explore a few examples. Suppose you are waiting for a delivery. It is scheduled for 3 p.m. It is now 3:30 p.m. You could declare, they are never coming. Or you could say, the probability of arrival is decreasing over time, but there is still a 40% chance they are just running late. See the difference? The first response is emotional. The second is strategic. Or let us say your friend says they are sure their new miracle juice cures fatigue, acne, and low self-esteem. You, being a fan of both science and sanity, say, "That seems like an extraordinary claim. Based on my prior knowledge, I assign a 5% probability to that being true." Your friend then rolls their eyes and offers you a sample that smells like regret. But you are using probabilistic armor. You are not dismissing. You are estimating. This is important. Probabilistic thinking does not mean doubting everything. It means calibrating your belief to match the strength of the evidence. If you have weak evidence, you have a weak belief. If you have strong evidence, you have a stronger belief. But you never say, "I am certain," unless you are talking about gravity or your neighbor forgetting to return your lawn chair. In fact, one of the most useful tools in probabilistic thinking is the concept of Bayesian updating, which sounds like something only mathematicians would enjoy, but is actually something you do all the time without realizing it. Here is how it works. You start with a prior belief. You then receive new evidence. Based on how likely that evidence would be if your belief were true versus if it were false, you update your belief accordingly. Let us say you hear a creak in your house at night. Your prior belief is that ghosts are unlikely. Then you hear another creak. Then you remember you live in an old house with wooden floors and bad insulation. So instead of leaping straight to definitely haunted, you update your belief by a very small amount, maybe from 0.01% to 0.02%. Still unlikely, still rational. Or take dating. You are on a first date. The person arrives 20 minutes late. You could say, "They are unreliable." Or you could say, "That lowers my confidence slightly, but maybe they got lost or there was traffic." You adjust. You update. You do not declare a moral verdict before the appetizers. Probabilistic thinking is also the antidote to overconfidence, which is a common human failing. People tend to say they are 100% sure of things that are, at best, 60% supported. This leads to bad predictions, bad decisions, and very loud arguments on the internet. By thinking probabilistically, you build in humility. You say, "I believe this strongly, but not completely." That allows you to be surprised without being shattered, to be wrong without being wrecked. It also helps in planning. Let us say you are organizing a picnic. You check the forecast. There is a 30% chance of rain. You do not cancel everything, but maybe you bring a tent. Maybe you have a backup plan. That is not paranoia. That is realism. Or consider financial decisions. You are evaluating two investment options. One has a high probability of moderate returns. The other has a low probability of massive gains. You weigh those probabilities against your risk tolerance. You do not say, "This one is going to make me rich." You say, "Given the data, this one is more likely to meet my goals." That is how adults think, or at least how adults should think. And yes, probabilistic thinking takes practice. Your brain prefers shortcuts. It likes yes or no. But with effort, you can retrain it to ask, "How likely is this? What is my confidence level? What new evidence would make me more or less sure?" That last question is a secret weapon. It keeps your beliefs flexible. It stops you from becoming that person who insists the earth is flat because they watched a 5-minute video while ignoring 5 centuries of evidence. It is worth noting that probabilistic thinking does not mean you never act. Sometimes you have to make a decision under uncertainty. You do not always get to wait for more data. That is why probabilistic thinking works well with expected value. Another beautiful, underrated concept. But that is another chapter. For now, just remember, certainty is a luxury. Reality is messy. Most things you believe are not entirely true or false. They are somewhere in between. Your job is to figure out where on that spectrum they live. So the next time someone demands that you take a firm stance, yes or no, right or wrong, love it or hate it, consider responding with, "I am 73% confident in my current position, but open to adjusting that number depending on what you have to say next." And if they say, "Stop being a nerd," smile politely. Because there is a 99.9% chance that they forgot to bring an umbrella, and the forecast just jumped to 100% petty rain. Anticipate error. What would disprove this? Let us begin with a humble confession. You are going to be wrong. probably often, possibly spectacularly. It is not a character flaw. It is not a cosmic punishment. It is just the price of living in a universe that refuses to come with a user manual. But here is the good news. Being wrong is not the problem. Failing to anticipate being wrong, that is the problem. That is the cliff you walk off when you forget to look down. That is where the rationality rule of anticipate error comes in like a kindly, slightly judgmental librarian whispering, "Have you considered that you might be full of nonsense?" This rule is about a simple question. What would disprove this? If you believe something, you should be able to say what kind of evidence would convince you otherwise. If you cannot do that, then you are not reasoning. You are clinging. You are not holding a belief. You are cuddling with it in a blanket fort of confirmation bias. Let us start with a basic example. You believe your new miracle face cream works. You use it for a week, and your skin looks better. You tell your friends. You tell strangers. You start using phrases like glow activation. Then someone asks, "What would convince you it does not work?" If your answer is nothing, congratulations. You are now in a monogamous relationship with a skincare product. You are not using logic. You are building a shrine. Rational thinking, on the other hand, asks you to define the conditions under which you would stop believing. That is not weakness. That is strength. It means your belief is testable, falsifiable, alive. It means you are not just collecting reasons to be right. You are creating a system that lets you discover when you are wrong before reality does it for you with a frying pan. This is the part where people start to squirm. Because deep down, most people are not looking for truth. They are looking for comfort. They want their beliefs to feel good, not to be accurate. And nothing ruins a good mental cuddle session faster than a well-placed question like, "What would change your mind?" Let us look at how this plays out in the real world. You believe that a certain diet, let us call it the bone broth and rage diet, is the secret to health. You feel great. You lose weight. You start recommending it to everyone, including toddlers and goldfish. Then someone shows you a study linking it to nutrient deficiencies and spontaneous crankiness. If you say, "That study must be wrong," or "They probably did not eat the right bones," then you never anticipated error. You never said, "If I start feeling worse, or if this pattern does not hold in a broader population, I will reevaluate." You just assumed you had found the golden ticket, and now you are holding onto it like it is made of gluten-free prophecy. This is where rationality asks for a contract. Before you commit to a belief, ask, "What specific thing would make me reconsider?" If the answer is nothing, then you are not practicing reason. You are doing emotional karaoke. Now let us take a more personal example. You believe your friend is always honest. Then one day, you catch them in a lie. If you say, "Well, they probably had a good reason," or "That was not really a lie, it was a metaphor," then you never set the boundary. You never asked, "What would disprove my belief that this person is trustworthy?" You are now doing mental gymnastics to preserve an illusion. People do this all the time. They say, "I trust this news source completely." Ask them, "What would make you question it?" They say, "If they ever got a big story wrong." Then you point out 3 stories they butchered. Suddenly they say, "Well, everyone makes mistakes." That goalpost? It is not just moving. It is in a different zip code. To anticipate error means setting the goalpost before you kick the ball. It means saying, "Here is how I will know I am wrong," not, "I will move the goal every time reality gets too inconvenient." This matters because being wrong is expensive. If you believe a treatment works and it does not, you waste time, money, and sometimes health. If you believe a person is loyal and they are not, you risk betrayal. If you believe a strategy will win and it fails, you lose trust, resources, and momentum. You cannot eliminate error, but you can plan for it. Let us talk about the scientific method for a moment. Science is not a parade of geniuses. It is a parade of hypotheses being taken out back and tested until they either survive or crumble. Every good experiment is designed with disconfirmation in mind. If X does not happen, then this idea fails. That is not defeat. That is clarity. If scientists ran studies the way most people argue on Twitter, peer review would be a food fight. Even in business, anticipating error is a superpower. Imagine a startup. The founder believes their app will change the world. The rational founder says, if we do not get at least 5,000 active users in 6 months, that means our model needs a pivot. The irrational founder says, the users just do not understand us yet. The market is not ready. Mercury is in retrograde. My aura is misaligned. Guess which one burns through cash while blaming the moon? Now, anticipating error does not mean being pessimistic. It means being prepared. It means recognizing that most ideas sound brilliant until they crash into the brick wall of reality. It means building exits into your belief system before the building catches fire. This applies to forecasting too. Say you predict a political outcome. You say, candidate X will win. Great. What would disprove that? Low turnout in key districts, a major scandal, a last-minute endorsement for the other side? List the conditions, define them. That way, when the results come in, you are not scrambling to rationalize. You are learning. This rule also helps in arguments. If you are debating someone, ask, what would make you change your mind? If they say, nothing, the debate is already over. They are not there to learn. They are there to perform. You, on the other hand, should be able to answer that question. If you cannot say what would change your mind is not open. It is laminated. Here is a thought experiment. Imagine someone believes the earth is flat. You ask, what would convince you it is round? They say, nothing. Every picture is fake. Every pilot is lying. Every scientist is in on it. That is not skepticism. That is religious devotion with a compass. Real skepticism says, if this happens, I will admit I was wrong. That is intellectual honesty. That is how you grow. So how do you apply this in your daily life? Start by writing down your beliefs. Then write what would disconfirm each one. Keep it specific. Not if it feels wrong, but if I see strong evidence from a reliable source that contradicts this, I will reevaluate. Then, when you encounter new information, compare it to your list. Has a disconfirmation condition been met? If yes, update. If no, carry on, but stay ready. This practice builds calibration. It teaches you to trust the process, not the outcome. And it makes you less likely to fall for ideas that sound good but crumble under scrutiny. Anticipating error also makes you harder to manipulate. If someone tries to sell you a belief with no way to disprove it, run. That is not a belief. That is a trap. Whether it is a product, a philosophy, or a political ideology, the best question you can ask is, what would make this idea fail? If there is no answer, then the idea is not grounded. It is floating above logic, tethered only to emotion. And if you want to test yourself, try this. Take one of your core beliefs, something you feel very sure about. Now imagine someone gave you $1 million to disprove it. How would you go about it? What evidence would you look for? What experts would you consult? If your answer is, I would not even try, then congratulations, you have found a belief that owns you. Let it go. Or at least, loosen the grip. Because the ability to say, here is what would prove me wrong, is not weakness. It is mastery. It means you are not afraid of the truth. You are just trying to get closer to it, one correction at a time. And if your friend ever asks you why you are talking to your notebook while muttering about conditional falsifiers, just smile and say you are anticipating error, and there is a 90% chance they will stop asking you for brunch. Which, honestly, is its own reward. Outside view, reference class forecasting. Imagine you are about to start a new project. Let us say it is a novel, or a business, or assembling an IKEA bookshelf that claims it requires no tools, but quietly assumes you are descended from a family of Scandinavian furniture wizards. You feel good, confident, inspired. You say, this will take 3 weeks, tops. 6 months later, your manuscript is 20 pages of vague metaphors. Your business plan is still in PowerPoint purgatory, and your bookshelf is now a modern art sculpture named Despair in pine veneer. Welcome to the danger of the inside view, your personal gut feeling about how things will go. This chapter is about why you should ignore your beautifully misguided optimism and consult something far more powerful, the outside view. The outside view, also known as reference class forecasting, is the act of stepping back from your magical bubble of hope and asking, how have similar things turned out for other people? You do not ask, will my project go well? You ask, how do projects like mine usually go for people like me? It is not glamorous. It is not motivational poster material. But it is reality, cold, unsentimental, statistically informed reality. The kind of reality that does not care about your vision board or your fancy spreadsheet with 17 color-coded tabs. Let us break this down. You are building an app. Your instinct, your inside view, tells you it will take 4 weeks and cost a fraction of your budget. Your enthusiasm is high. You are already imagining TechCrunch headlines and interviews where you pretend to be surprised by your own brilliance. But the outside view says, most app launches run late, over budget, and under expectations. In fact, most never reach a stable user base. Many die quietly, surrounded by broken APIs and uninstalled notifications. The average is brutal. The graveyard is full. Now, you could say, but mine will be different. That is cute. That is precious. But it is also statistically delusional. Every person in that graveyard once said the same thing. Every ghost in the app cemetery once tweeted, "We are disrupting the calendar space." Taking the outside view means benchmarking your expectations against actual outcomes, not fantasies, not outliers, not your cousin E's success story that started with a lottery ticket and ended with a TED Talk. Let us try another example. You are getting married. Congratulations. You say, our relationship is strong, we are different, we communicate, we love tacos. Inside view, this marriage will last forever. Outside view, roughly 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. Communication helps, but it does not make you immune to financial stress, personal growth curves, or arguments about the correct way to load the dishwasher. Now, does that mean you should not get married? Of course not. It just means you should plan with your eyes open. Maybe do not spend all your savings on an underwater wedding where guests wear snorkels and the vows are written on biodegradable seaweed. The point is not to kill your dreams. The point is to anchor your expectations to data, to say, given what has happened to people in my situation, what should I realistically expect? Inside view is fueled by narrative. It says, I have a plan. I am smart. I am motivated. Things will work out. Outside view is fueled by base rates. It says, you might be smart and motivated, but so were all the people who failed. This is not cynicism. It is statistical compassion. It saves you from heartbreak, bankruptcy, and projects that become permanent fixtures in your to-do list, like emotionally heavy furniture. Take writing a book. Inside view says, I will write every day and finish this draft in 2 months. Outside view says, most first-time authors take at least a year. Some never finish. Most abandon the second draft. Coffee consumption spikes. Tears are common. Guess which one is more likely to be correct? Or let us say you are applying to grad school. Inside view says, my application is strong. My personal essay is a masterpiece of emotional vulnerability and Latin quotes. Outside view says, thousands of people apply with similar profiles. Many have better test scores. Some volunteer in war zones while also curing blindness in their spare time. Your odds are not bad, but they are not great either. If you plan using the inside view alone, you are building a sandcastle and hoping it will withstand a hurricane. If you use the outside view, you are at least checking the weather forecast and investing in metaphorical sandbags. Now, why do people avoid the outside view? Because it is uncomfortable. It strips away the illusion of uniqueness. It says, you are not special. You are a data point in a bell curve. Most people do not like being told they are a bell curve. It lacks romance. But rationality does not care about your feelings. Rationality wants your predictions to be accurate, not comforting. And the outside view is one of the best tools available for making decisions under uncertainty. So how do you actually use it? Step 1. Find your reference class. What are you trying to do? What is the category of similar efforts? Writing a novel, launching a product, starting a YouTube channel about obscure Venetian accordion music. Find out what has happened to others who tried the same. Step 2. Look at the outcomes. What was the average result? How many succeeded? How long did it take? What were the common pitfalls? Step 3. Adjust your expectations accordingly. You can still be optimistic, but now it is informed optimism. Optimism with a helmet and insurance. The outside view also protects you from planning fallacy, the human tendency to underestimate how long things will take, how much they will cost, and how many small disasters will show up along the way. The inside view says, we can build this feature in 2 weeks. The outside view says, features like this usually take 6 weeks and end with 3 people crying into their laptops. Believe the tears, trust the data, respect the averages. Even in personal goals, the outside view is your friend. Trying to lose weight? Most people plateau after the initial drop. Trying to get out of debt? Most plans fail unless habits change. Trying to meditate every day? Most people last a week and then forget why they downloaded the app. You are not doomed, but you are not exempt. You are not writing a story where you get to skip the boring chapters and jump straight to the triumphant montage. The outside view reminds you that you are not the exception to the rule until you have evidence. And sometimes, brace yourself, you are the rule. This mindset does not make you pessimistic. It makes you realistic. It lets you build systems that account for failure instead of pretending it will not happen. If the average time to learn a new language is 18 months, do not expect to be fluent in 3 weeks because you watched a YouTube video about memory hacks while eating lentils. Be better than the average by understanding where the average is. And here is the bonus. If you succeed, despite the odds, it feels better, because you know you beat something real. You did not win because you believed harder. You won because you planned smarter. So the next time you're about to say, that will never happen to me, pause. Take a breath. Ask, has this happened to people like me before? If the answer is yes, you are not exempt. You are on the list. Plan accordingly. Because the universe does not care how determined you feel on a Monday morning with good lighting and a fresh to-do list. It cares about what usually happens when a human with your level of experience, resources, and caffeine intake attempts the thing you are attempting. The outside view is not here to crush your dreams. It is here to make your dreams less stupid. And if you do everything right, and you still end up eating ramen while surrounded by the broken pieces of your bookshelf, at least you can say, well, the data predicted this. Then file it under Reference Class, Home Improvement Failures, and add a fresh entry for next time, just in case you decide to build the matching dresser. Scope sensitivity. Numbers should matter. Let us begin with a question that should be simple, but probably is not. Which is worse, 10 birds dying in an oil spill or 10,000? Most people say 10,000. That would be the correct answer, mathematically speaking. But emotionally, psychologically, weirdly, a lot of people feel just as bad, or sometimes worse, about the 10. Why? Because human brains, noble as they pretend to be, are not great at scope sensitivity. Scope sensitivity is the idea that the size of a problem should affect how much you care about it. Sounds obvious, right? If one person is drowning, you care. If 100 people are drowning, you should care more. If 1,000 people are drowning, you should be shouting at someone to invent a better life jacket. And yet, that is not how people usually react. Human brains are not wired to handle large numbers emotionally. We evolved in small tribes. dealing with small problems, how to cook food without catching on fire, how to avoid being eaten by large cats, how to make eye contact without starting a duel. As a result, our empathy operates on a personal scale, not a statistical one. You can picture one starving child. You can feel for her. But 10,000? That becomes a statistic. You stop picturing faces and start picturing numbers. And nothing kills emotional urgency faster than turning tragedy into a math problem. That is scope insensitivity. Let us take a classic example from behavioral economics. Researchers asked participants how much they would donate to save 2,000 birds from drowning in oil ponds. Then they asked a second group how much they would donate to save 20,000 birds. Then a third group, 200,000 birds. Care to guess the result? People donated about the same amount, no matter how many birds were on the chopping block. Some even donated less to the larger group, because their emotions were already maxed out. Their empathy circuits hit capacity at "oh, poor bird" and never noticed the zeros stacking up. This is not just a quirk. It is a serious failure in judgment, because it means your brain, unless trained otherwise, responds equally to small problems and large ones, which is a terrible way to prioritize action, money, or energy. Imagine you are in charge of a city budget. You have a choice: spend $1 million to fix potholes in one street, or spend the same amount to fix potholes in 50 streets. If you are not scope sensitive, you might pick the one that got the most attention on the news, even if it affects far fewer people. That is irrational. That is how you end up with a government that spends more on statues than on safety. Scope sensitivity means learning to align your emotional response with the actual size of the issue. If something affects more people, more animals, more resources, it deserves more attention, more action, not just the same handful of emotional tokens you hand out whenever something sad pops up. Let us take a modern example. Suppose a charity says they can save one child's life for $2,500. Then they say they can save 10 children's lives for $25,000. Most people react to the first one with tears and a credit card. The second one? Somehow it feels colder, more distant, less urgent, even though it is literally the same deal. Multiplied. Why? Because people are not multiplying. They are not scaling their concern. They are maxing out emotionally at one and then flatlining. That is like a fire alarm that goes off at a candle and stays the same volume when the whole house is burning down. Scope sensitivity helps with decision-making. It helps with donations, policy, emergency response, and even personal ethics. It forces you to ask, how big is this problem really? And am I treating it like a small deal just because my emotions got bored halfway through the second sentence? Here is a more absurd example. Say someone offers you two options. You can save one panda from extinction, or you can save 100 pandas. Same cost, same effort. But the first panda has a name. She is called Lulu. You see a photo. You learn her favorite bamboo. The second group is just 100 pandas. Guess which option most people pick? If you said Lulu, you have correctly identified the curse of identifiable victim bias. People connect more deeply to a single story than to a mass statistic. That is scope insensitivity in disguise. It is empathy going rogue. You might care more about Lulu, but if you want to help pandas, the correct choice is the larger group. Every time. Unless those 100 pandas are secretly plotting against the ecosystem. But that would be a different chapter. Scope sensitivity also applies to time. You might feel overwhelmed about wasting a day, but oddly unconcerned about wasting 10 minutes 100 times. You might stress over losing $100, but ignore the daily trickle of $5 subscriptions that never get used. Big problems often hide in small increments. Let us not forget environmental issues. People panic about one factory dumping waste in a river. That is visual. That is specific. But thousands of smaller sources, cars, lawns, packaging, contribute much more overall. Still, they are invisible. They do not trigger emotional outrage, but from a rational standpoint, they matter more. You just need the math to feel real. So how do you become scope sensitive? Step 1. Notice your emotional flatline. If you feel the same level of concern about 10 deaths as you do about 10,000, stop. Ask yourself, what am I missing? Step 2. Use ratios and comparisons. Say something affects 1 in 10 people. That is not just a number. That is 3 people in your friend group. That is 2 in your family. Suddenly the scope becomes personal again. You shrink it to a size your brain can feel, then scale your actions to match. Step 3. Practice numeracy. Learn to visualize numbers. Learn what 1,000,000 looks like. Learn how long it takes to count to 1,000. These little exercises help bridge the emotional gap between small and large. Step 4. Avoid anchor bias. Just because the first number you heard was small does not mean everything else is too. If someone says, "This disease kills 10 people a year," and then you learn it actually kills 10,000, do not stick with the emotional weight of the first number. Update. And yes, this kind of thinking can feel cold. It can feel robotic. But that is only because people confuse intensity of emotion with importance of issue. They are not the same. Rationality asks you to scale your care. Not just feel harder, but feel smarter. Even in daily life, scope sensitivity matters. You might spend hours stressing over a bad haircut while ignoring the fact that your apartment lease is about to expire and you have not packed a single spoon. You might worry about your neighbor's loud dog while ignoring the fact that your own stove has been making suspicious clicking noises for 3 weeks. Rational prioritization is scope sensitivity applied with urgency. Let us talk about global aid for a moment. Say one charity spends $10,000 to dig a well that gives water to a village of 200 people. Another spends $10,000 on a campaign to raise awareness about water problems, reaching 50,000 people, but not directly solving anything. Which one gets more donations? Often the second, because it feels more visible, more trendy, more emotional. But the first one is doing more per dollar. Scope sensitivity says, follow the impact, not the sparkle. It also applies to time management. If a meeting saves 5 minutes a day for 100 employees, that is over 8 hours saved per day. But nobody notices. It is just 5 minutes. But multiply that across people, across days, and you get a full-time position's worth of time back. That is scope in disguise. You may not feel it, but it is there. Just like calories in a healthy smoothie. So the next time someone says, it is just a small thing, ask how often it happens. Ask how many people it affects. Ask how much time, money, or energy it consumes across a week, a year, a lifetime. Scope sensitivity is not a moral compass. It is a reality compass. It stops you from wasting your limited attention on shiny little emergencies while ignoring the quiet avalanche happening just out of frame, because the difference between one broken cup and a collapsing kitchen shelf is often just how closely you looked at the numbers before everything fell apart. And if you ever find yourself emotionally devastated by the plight of a single injured goose while calmly scrolling past a humanitarian crisis, do not panic. You are not a bad person. You are just another emotionally overwhelmed mammal with a severely outdated empathy processor. Now, if someone would just invent a feelings calculator, perhaps then we could finally donate in proportion to our spreadsheets. Until then, let us all try to care about 10,000 things at once, just not in alphabetical order. That way lies madness and an inbox full of penguin adoption offers. Avoid multiplying uncertainty. One layer at a time. Let us say you wake up one morning and your phone is missing. Not under the pillow missing. Not in the fridge next to the pickles missing. Truly, existentially missing. Now, you could say, maybe I left it at work. Reasonable. Then you think, or maybe someone stole it. Less likely. Then, maybe someone stole it because I accidentally took a photo of a government UFO while making pasta last night. Congratulations. You have just begun the noble sport of multiplying uncertainty, also known as the Olympic event, where each new guess gets shakier than the last, and the entire tower collapses somewhere around, the CIA is reading my texts about lentils. This is the mental mistake where you stack hypothesis upon hypothesis, assumption upon assumption, until you are 5 stories up in the air with no structural support and a flag that reads, "I have connected the dots." Let us put this in simpler terms. Multiplying uncertainty is when you say, if A is true, and then B happens because of A, and then C must be a result of B, and suddenly you are 4 layers deep into a theory that relies on every single step being flawless. Spoiler, it never is. Rationality says, do not do that. Instead, it gently suggests that you should treat each assumption as a separate gamble, and the more gambles you stack, the less confident you should be about the outcome. This is not a buzzkill. This is basic statistical hygiene. Let us take an example from everyday life. You are planning a party. First assumption, people will come. Reasonable. Second assumption, people will arrive on time. Debatable. Third assumption, they will bring the food they said they would. Risky. Fourth assumption, nobody will forget the address, get the wrong day, or show up with a vegan lasagna made entirely of kale regret. By the time you get to the 5th assumption, that your ex will come and finally apologize like they practiced in your imagination, you have built a fantasy castle on a swamp of unreliable expectations. Each step has a probability, multiply them together, and your odds of everything going right shrink faster than your faith in online dating. This is the problem with multiplying uncertainty. Even if each step is kind of likely, the combined outcome quickly becomes very unlikely. Mathematically, this is just basic probability. Say there is a 90% chance of each of 3 events happening. That sounds pretty solid. But the chance of all 3 happening? That is 0.9 times 0.9 times 0.9, 72.9%. Still not terrible. Now try 5 events. 0.9 to the power of 5, 59%. 10 events, down to 35%. And if you are working with sketchier odds, say 60% confidence per assumption, your house of logic collapses like a flan in a heat wave. This is not just theoretical. This applies to conspiracy theories, over-planning, pseudoscience, and your cousin Chad's theory about how the moon landing was faked using shadows, mirrors, and leftover set pieces from The Wizard of Oz. The more assumptions your argument needs, the less believable it becomes. Yet people do it all the time. Aliens are real, and the government knows, and they are covering it up, and they are sending signals through the weather, and my toaster has been acting weird lately. Each layer makes the whole story more fragile, but instead of stepping back and checking the foundation, people often respond by adding more layers, more detail, more justification, more duct tape over the gaping holes in logic. This is what happens when you forget the golden rule of probabilistic thinking. Uncertainty compounds. In rationality, you want the fewest assumptions possible. That is why Occam's razor is so popular. It trims the fat. It says, why guess 5 things when one will do? Now sometimes you need assumptions. That is fine. But you have to respect what they are. Guesses. Hunches. Not bricks you can build a mansion with. More like thin ice you should not skate across wearing lead boots. Let us take a more grounded example. You are evaluating a new health supplement. The company says, 1. The ingredients are safe. 2. The ingredients are effective. 3. The dosages are optimal. 4. The formula works better than alternatives. 5. The clinical trial was legit. 6. The trial was not funded by the supplement company's founder's nephew. You want to believe. But notice how many layers of belief you have to hold up to get there. Each one might seem reasonable on its own. Together, they form a rickety bridge over a canyon of wishful thinking. The more claims something makes, the more likely one of them is wrong, and the entire argument comes crashing down like a gluten-free cake made by someone who just guessed how baking works. This also explains why simple explanations are often better, not because simplicity is always true, but because it usually involves fewer bets. It is like a poker game. If you bet on one hand, you have a decent shot. If you are trying to win 5 hands at once while blindfolded, and also trying to convince people that poker is a metaphor for your startup, you are about to lose your shirt and probably your dignity. Let us also talk about conversations. When someone makes a claim that relies on 10 hidden assumptions, your job is not to say uh-huh and nod while slowly detaching from reality. Your job is to gently ask, "What are you assuming here?" And when they say, "Oh, just this one thing," keep digging. Because like an iceberg, the real danger is below the surface, and probably even colder. Multiply uncertainty too many times, and soon you are believing that your dog is sad because Mercury is in retrograde, and you forgot to sage your laundry room. So how do you avoid this trap? Step 1. Break it down. When you hear or form a complex idea, identify each assumption. Write them out if you must. This is not an exorcism. This is intellectual plumbing. Step 2. Estimate the likelihood of each one being true. You do not need precise numbers. Rough guesses will do. Step 3. Do the math, or at least the logic. Recognize that 5 assumptions at 80% confidence do not give you 80% total confidence. They give you 80% to the power of 5, 32.8%. That is the confidence level of a squirrel guessing which road leads to acorns. Step 4. Challenge the weakest link. If one assumption is shaky, the whole argument becomes fragile. Do not reinforce the top of the tower if the bottom is made of pudding. This applies to planning too. Say you are planning a big event. You assume 1. The weather will cooperate. 2. The venue will be available. 3. People will show up. 4. The microphone will work. 5. Nobody will set off the fire alarm with a fog machine. Even if each thing is 90% likely, your perfect day is now only about 59% likely. And that is before factoring in the intern who forgets to book the caterer. Better plan. Build buffers. Expect failure. Have contingencies. Do not gamble on perfection. That is not realism. That is mythology. The great irony is that many smart people fall into this trap because they are smart. They can imagine complex systems, intricate plots, and 15 ways something might work. But intelligence does not guarantee sound reasoning. It just means you can draw fancier maps of fictional territories. Rationality says, keep it simple until you have to get complex. Start with what you know, then test what you guess. Do not stack uncertainty like you are trying to build a suspense novel out of baseless optimism. You can apply this principle to almost everything. Politics, watch for layered claims. Science, ask how many steps each theory requires. Finance, be suspicious of investment strategies that promise riches by stringing together 20 ifs and a goat sacrifice. Personal drama, realize that just because your friend was quiet and your text was left unread and your dog growled at their purse does not mean they are secretly plotting your downfall. It probably just means they were busy or forgot, or your dog needs therapy. So the next time you find yourself thinking, well, if this is true, then that must be true, and then surely this third thing follows. Pause. Ask yourself, how many floors have I built here? How much of this is resting on guesses? And do I really want to bet my emotional stability on a tower made of mental popsicle sticks? Then take a step back. Remove the extra layers. Focus on what you can actually justify. Because life is uncertain enough already. There is no need to build your logic tower so high that it becomes a safety hazard for passing birds. Especially if those birds work for the government and are watching your phone from space. Which is totally only like a 3% chance. Maybe 4% if the microwave is humming weird again. Hold off on proposing solutions. Understand first, fix later. Picture this. You are in a meeting. A problem is mentioned. Something vague about declining user engagement or increasing noise complaints from the office espresso machine. Before the sentence is even finished, someone proudly slaps a solution on the table like they are auctioning off wisdom. We need a new strategy, they say. Let us pivot. Or worse, let us innovate. This is a textbook case of the brain doing something it loves far too much, skipping the part where it understands the problem and heading straight into fix-it mode. This is where today's rationality rule strolls in like a patient, slightly exasperated adult. Hold off on proposing solutions. Let us call it what it is: premature optimization, solutioneering, or as it is sometimes known in less polite circles, intellectual peacocking. It feels great. It makes you sound smart. But if you try to fix something before you understand it, you're just throwing darts in the dark while blindfolded and possibly facing the wrong direction. The issue is simple but devastating. Humans hate ambiguity. Uncertainty itches. Questions feel unfinished. Problems beg for resolution like a sitcom plot just before the commercial break. So what do people do? They propose something. Anything. Let us change the logo. Let us fire Steve. Let us automate the problem until it disappears under a pile of error messages. But rational thinking asks you to pause. Step back. Ask, what is really going on here? Because sometimes the thing that looks broken is just misunderstood. Sometimes the complaint is not the root cause. Sometimes the espresso machine is not malfunctioning. It is just passive-aggressively clogged with entitlement and oat milk residue. Let us take an example from daily life. Your friend says, "I feel tired all the time." You, being a fixer, immediately reply, "You need to sleep more. Have you tried magnesium? Get off your phone, do yoga, stop eating bread." Pause. What if their problem is not sleep at all? What if it is stress, or boredom, or the fact that they are currently attempting to finish a dissertation, raise a toddler, and train for a marathon out of spite? By jumping to a solution, you miss the chance to explore the problem. You miss the layers. You treat the symptom as if it were the disease. That is like trying to fix a leaky pipe by painting over the wet patch and calling it moist vintage. The first step is not fixing. It is understanding. This is not a new idea. Socrates built an entire method around it. Doctors use it. Scientists use it. Mechanics who want to keep their jobs use it. Yet somehow, when faced with a minor inconvenience, the average person becomes a motivational speaker with a toolbox full of glitter and no manual. Now let us look at the structure behind this. There are two systems at play in your brain. Psychologists call them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, impulsive. System 2 is slow, reflective, rational. When a problem appears, System 1 wants to pounce. System 2 wants to investigate. Unfortunately, System 1 often wins because it is quicker and more fun. It gives you the rush of certainty, even if that certainty is totally made up. But if you want to make fewer terrible decisions, you need to invite System 2 to the party and give it time to stretch. Holding off on proposing solutions is a way of handing the mic to System 2. Let us talk about engineering for a moment. In engineering, premature solutions lead to nightmare fuel. You design something to fix a performance issue, only to realize it was a logging error. You patch a bug, only to introduce 3 new ones and a haunting whine from the server room. You automate a process before you understand the user behavior, and now the users are gone and the automation is just sending emails into a void labeled "Why?" Understanding the problem deeply, measuring it, defining it, watching it misbehave like a toddler with a glue stick, that is where the real work is. This also explains why consultants often seem more effective than they are. They spend half the project asking questions, listening, and mapping the terrain. They delay proposing solutions, and by the time they suggest something, they know more about your company than you do. You could do the same thing. You just have to resist the urge to solve prematurely. Let us try an example in relationships. Your partner says, "I feel like you are not listening to me." You respond, "Okay, I will listen more. I will schedule a listening session. I will set calendar reminders to nod thoughtfully." Pause. Do you understand what they meant? Was it about listening? Or was it about feeling unseen, ignored, dismissed? Maybe it was not about listening at all. Maybe it was about connection, Maybe the real issue is that you nod and say, "uh-huh," while mentally scrolling through a list of groceries. Solutions are nice, but insight is better. To hold off on solutions means asking more questions, good ones. Ones like, what exactly is the problem? How do we know it is a problem? What is the scope? Who does it affect? When does it happen? What does better look like? If you cannot answer those questions, you are not ready to solve anything. You are just rearranging furniture in a burning house and hoping nobody notices the smell. Let us explore how this shows up in technology. Tech teams often get excited about building features. Someone says, "Users are dropping off after the second screen." The room responds, "Redesign the interface, add a progress bar, put an AI there, add confetti." Nobody stops to ask, why are they dropping off? Is the second screen confusing? Is the question too personal? Are they getting hungry and abandoning the form to make lasagna? If you do not understand the cause, your fix is a guess. And guess-based engineering is just very expensive improvisation. Now let us zoom in on the psychology behind it. People often propose solutions quickly because it protects their ego. If you are seen as someone who can solve things fast, you feel valuable. You look smart, you get credit. But if you slow down and admit you do not know yet, you risk looking unsure. That is why let us explore the problem further feels scary. It sounds like stalling. But in reality, it is the most responsible thing you can do. It says, "I care enough about getting this right that I am willing to delay gratification and look beneath the surface." That is not weak. That is discipline. This rule also helps you avoid framing errors. Often, the first version of the problem is not the real problem. If you take it at face value and rush to solve it, you waste effort. But if you hold off and examine it, you often find the framing is wrong. The user did not want a faster app. They wanted fewer interruptions. The employee did not want a raise. They wanted recognition. The customer did not want a chatbot. They wanted a person. Framing is everything, and you only get the right frame by listening first, solving later. Now, what about emergencies? Yes, sometimes you must act fast. Fire, flood, alien invasion, fine. Go with your instincts. But most situations are not emergencies. Most are puzzles, complex, subtle, and loaded with hidden variables. In those cases, speed is not your friend. Speed is what gets you a solution that feels good, but solves nothing. It is what leads to, "We need a new policy," when what you really need is fewer policies and more common sense. So how do you apply this in real life? Step 1. Hear the problem. Step 2. Say, "Interesting. Tell me more." Step 3. Ask at least 3 questions before suggesting anything. Step 4. If you feel the urge to propose a fix immediately, write it down. Then put it away. Return to it after you have done some real thinking. And if you are working with a team, reward the people who hold off. The ones who say, "Let us dig into this." The ones who ask annoying questions. The ones who make you groan, but then reveal that you were solving the wrong thing all along. They are not stalling. They are saving you from yourself. Because solving problems feels productive. But understanding problems, that is progress. And if you are wondering whether this whole chapter is just a cleverly disguised way to help you stop fixing things with duct tape and good intentions, well, you are already getting it. Now, if only someone had used this rule before installing that espresso machine in the office lobby. Because the real problem was never the noise. It was the existential crisis that comes from overhearing Karen explain her oat milk trauma for the 14th time before 9 a.m. Map versus territory. Beliefs are models, not truth. You are holding a map. It looks official. It has lines and symbols, and a reassuring compass rose in the corner. You point to a dot and say, "This is where I am." Then you take a step forward and walk directly into a lake. This is the moment where reality smacks you with the realization that your map was not the territory. Congratulations. You have just discovered one of the most important and most ignored rules of rationality. The map is not the territory. Your beliefs are not reality. They are guesses, sketches, approximations. Some are helpful, Some are slightly wrong, some are very wrong but feel accurate because they have fancy colors and you once printed them in landscape format. Let us unpack this in terms of rational thinking. A map is any mental model you use to navigate the world, your assumptions, your beliefs, your theories about how stuff works. People are mostly good. The free market solves everything. If I smile at the barista, they will give me the muffin I actually wanted. The territory is reality. It is messy. It is loud. It does not care what your map says. If your belief says, this path is clear, but the territory is a jungle of disappointment and surprise puddles, guess what wins? That is right. The puddles. This principle is essential for one reason. Most people confuse their map for the territory. They do not say, I believe this. They say, this is how the world is. They do not ask, is my model still useful? They ask, why is reality being difficult again? You can spot the confusion by how people talk. Someone says, that person is rude. No, that is a map. The territory is that a person spoke in a tone you interpreted as rude. You made a judgment based on your model of how polite people sound. Or someone says, this strategy will work. It always does. No, that is a map. The territory is full of variables, including new data, shifting dynamics, and the possibility that your strategy only worked last time because Mercury was in a good mood. Maps are useful. Beliefs are necessary. You need them to function. But the danger comes when you forget they are just tools, not truth. Let us use an example you might know. Calories. Calories are a map, a way to estimate energy intake. But your body, that is the territory. And it turns out the body does not always process food the way the label says. It absorbs differently based on how you chew, how you digest, how much fiber was involved, and whether you were emotionally crying into your granola. If you think, this meal has 400 calories, means I will gain or burn exactly 400 units of energy, you are treating the map like the territory, and your waistline will eventually file a complaint. Another classic? IQ tests. IQ is a map. It tries to represent cognitive ability, but it is not the full territory. It does not measure creativity, emotional intelligence, or the ability to avoid replying all on company-wide emails. Yet people treat it like a complete guide to human value. That is map territory confusion with a side of arrogance. Let us talk about models of the economy. An economist builds a model. It predicts growth. It uses assumptions. Rational actors, perfect information, no banana-related trade wars. The model says everything is fine. Then a pandemic hits. Or someone invents a cryptocurrency based on frog memes. The model fails. The economist says, this was unpredictable. No, it was predictable. It just was not in the model. The territory was more chaotic than the map accounted for. That does not make the model worthless. It makes it incomplete. This distinction matters because when your beliefs stop matching reality, you have two options. 1. Adjust the map. 2. Deny the territory. Guess which one most people pick? That is right. They double down on the map. They say, no, this should work. No, they should not be like that. No, the data must be wrong because my belief makes me feel safe. And that is where rationality chimes in. Update your map. Do not yell at the terrain. Do not demand the forest rearrange itself because your navigation app is feeling confident today. Step back. Observe. Adjust. That is how explorers survive. That is how thinkers stay sane. Let us switch to relationships for a second. You have a map of your partner. They love action movies. They hate seafood. They always remember my birthday. Then one day, they fall asleep during Fast and Furious 27, order calamari, and forget the date entirely. That is the territory speaking. If you cling to the map, you say, they must be faking. Something is wrong. I cannot be wrong. My map is laminated. But if you update the map, you say, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they changed. Maybe preferences are not carved in granite. This is not weakness. It is mental flexibility. The ability to say, I thought the world looked like this. Now I see it differently. Even science gets this wrong sometimes. Science is supposed to be the champion of map updating, and usually it is. But sometimes scientists fall in love with their theories. They publish papers, they build reputations. Then new data arrives and contradicts everything. Some update, others cling. They say the data is flawed. They say the sample size was small. They say it is an anomaly. This is not science anymore. This is ego with a clipboard. The goal of rationality is not to have the perfect map. The goal is to have a useful map, one that helps you make better decisions, and to know when to replace it with a better one. Let us also acknowledge that some maps are social maps. You grow up with a belief about how people should act, how careers work, what success looks like. Those are maps. Society gives them to you at birth, wraps them in tradition, and rarely mentions the fine print. But eventually, you hit territory that does not match. You see people succeeding in ways that do not make sense. You see kindness where you expected cruelty. You see chaos where you expected structure. You can cling to the map, or you can say, maybe there is more going on here. One of the best habits you can build is this: separate the belief from the truth. Say, here is what I think, not here is how things are. Say, this model works for now, not this is the final word. And test your map often. Ask, is this still accurate? What data would disprove this? What has changed since I built this belief? Because maps decay, they age, the world moves. If you are using a map from 2005 to navigate a world full of drones, AI, and milk made from peas, you are going to get lost. Let us not forget confirmation bias. It loves maps. It rewards you for looking at your map and then only noticing territory that agrees with it. You say, this must be true because I keep seeing it happen. But that is like using a broken GPS and blaming reality for not rearranging itself around your fantasy. So, how do you avoid the trap? Step 1. Always remember your belief is a model. Step 2. Look for where it breaks, where reality pushes back, where your expectations are not being met. Step 3. Update. Do not mourn the old map. Thank it. It got you this far. Then replace it with something better. And finally, do not judge people for having different maps. Maybe theirs is not wrong. Maybe they are just standing in a different part of the territory. Because someone yelling "turn left" might not be crazy. They might be using a different map. Or maybe they are lost too, but at least they brought snacks. And if all else fails, try not to fall into a lake, unless the map says it is a shortcut. Then by all means, bring a towel and enjoy the territory. Reality was never going to stay on the path anyway. Rhetoric warning. Words are not arguments. You're in the middle of a discussion, a serious one. You are presenting your carefully researched point, full of charts, footnotes, and the emotional restraint of a monk. Then the other person responds with, well, obviously only a fool would believe that. The crowd nods. Your pulse jumps. Somewhere, a tiny part of your brain screams, that was not an argument. Welcome to the land of rhetoric, where words sound powerful, emotions run high, and logic quietly packs its bags and slips out the back door. This chapter is about a critical rule of rational thinking. Do not confuse rhetoric with reasoning. Or in friendlier terms, just because someone sounds confident does not mean they are making sense. Let us define our terms first. An argument is a claim supported by reasons and evidence. It has structure. It invites scrutiny. It says, here is my position, and here is why you should consider it. Rhetoric, on the other hand, is about persuasion through style. It is tone, volume, charisma, metaphor, emotional triggers, body language, and dramatic pauses designed to make you feel something, preferably agreement. Now, rhetoric is not evil. It has its place. It can make an argument clearer or more engaging, but when rhetoric becomes a substitute for logic, when someone wins the room because they delivered a punchline instead of a point, you are watching a performance, not a discussion. Let us break this down with a few examples. Say you are in a debate about climate change. You present scientific data, temperature records, carbon levels, consensus reports. Your opponent responds, "Oh, so now we are supposed to trust the same scientists who said eggs were bad, then good, then bad again?" That is not a rebuttal. That is rhetorical misdirection. It feels clever, it gets laughs, it triggers doubt. But it does not engage with the claim. It attacks a vague group, scientists, leans on past frustration, and dodges the actual argument like a raccoon avoiding responsibility for knocking over your trash can. This is the danger of style over substance. People love confident speakers. They love metaphors. They love passionate gestures. They love a zinger at the right time. And in the process, they often forget to check if any of those things are connected to facts. Politicians do this constantly. One says, "Our country is in trouble." That is vague. They add, "We need to take back control." That is emotionally charged. Then they say, "The other side wants chaos." That is framing. Finally, they conclude, "That is why I will fight for you." That is pathos. At no point have they said what is happening, why it is happening, what they will do, or why it would work. But it feels like an argument, and people cheer because they are hearing confidence and passion and mistaking it for clarity and substance. This is what rationality tries to warn you about. Rhetorical force does not equal logical weight. You would not judge a bridge's strength by how confident the architect sounds, so do not judge ideas by how passionately they are delivered. Let us talk about some of the classic rhetorical tricks to watch for. 1. Appeals to emotion. These are arguments designed to bypass your reasoning and punch you straight in the feelings. How could you not care about the children? Do you want to be the kind of person who lets this happen? Only a heartless monster would disagree. These are not arguments. These are emotional ambushes. They work because humans have empathy, but they skip the step where you evaluate facts and jump straight to moral panic. 2. Loaded language. This is when someone smuggles judgment into their vocabulary. That radical new policy, her outrageous opinion, the so-called expert. Each of those phrases contains a bias. They nudge you toward a conclusion before the reasoning even begins. It is like starting a trial by calling the defendant probably guilty Steve. 3. False dilemmas. This is when the speaker presents only two options, usually their view and a straw man version of yours. Either you support this or you want the system to collapse. If you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. You are with us or against us. There is no middle ground, no complexity, just an emotional binary designed to corral you into agreement. 4. Name-calling and ridicule. When logic fails, insult. Only an idiot would believe that. You sound like someone who has not read a book since high school. That is rich coming from a guy who cannot even parallel park. These lines might make people laugh. They might shut you down, but they do not prove anything. If your argument needs a punchline to survive, it is not ready to go outside without a helmet. 5. Confident vagueness. This is the rhetorical move of sounding authoritative without actually saying anything concrete. We need bold solutions. We must return to our values. Change is coming. These phrases are comforting, inspiring even. But they mean nothing without context. What solutions? What values? What kind of change? And is it the good kind, or the kind that ends with robots taking over the kitchen? Rhetoric is not just verbal, it is visual too. Fancy charts, well-dressed presenters, expensive fonts, dramatic lighting. None of these things are arguments, but they make people nod like something wise just happened. Do not be fooled by presentation inflation. A bad idea in a beautiful package is still a bad idea. It just smells like lavender now. So how do you protect yourself? First, always ask, what is the actual claim? Strip away the emotion, the metaphor, the swagger, and find the core statement. Is it testable? Is it supported? Is it coherent? Second, ask, what are the reasons? Not the slogans, not the feelings, The actual logic. Can they explain why they believe it without theatrics? Third, check. Are they addressing the counter-arguments? If someone avoids disagreement like a vampire avoids daylight, that is not strength. That is fragility in disguise. And finally, do not be hypnotized by certainty. People who are wrong are often louder than people who are right. Confidence is not a signal of truth. It is a signal of confidence. This principle also works inward. Be skeptical of your own rhetorical tricks. Are you using analogies instead of evidence? Are you dodging tough questions with clever phrasing? Are you winning arguments by sounding impressive instead of being correct? Check yourself before you charm yourself. Because rhetoric is fun, it is addictive, it gets applause. But in the long run, logic wins. Quietly, patiently, without needing a mic drop. And let us not pretend this only applies to debates. It shows up in product pitches, in advertising, in meetings where someone says value-added synergy, and everyone pretends to know what that means. Being a rational thinker means knowing when words are being used to reveal truth and when they are being used to obscure it. Words can inspire, they can educate, they can move nations, but they can also distract, distort, and derail. So the next time someone tries to impress you with a dazzling speech that sounds suspiciously like it was designed by a motivational poster and a fog machine, pause, look past the volume, ignore the metaphors. Ask, what are they actually saying? If the answer is nothing, do not be afraid to smile, nod, and promptly forget everything you just heard. Because there is a difference between being persuaded and being bamboozled. And only one of those ends with you buying a timeshare, 3 resistance bands, and a juice cleanse subscription from a man named Skylar, who once lost an argument to a houseplant. Steelmanning, build the best version of the opposing view. You're in an argument. Maybe it is about politics, climate change, pineapple on pizza, or whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. You listen to what the other person says, you roll your eyes, and you respond by tearing into the dumbest possible version of their point, and you feel victorious. But are you? This chapter is about a rationality rule most people forget the moment their ego gets mildly inconvenienced. Steelmanning. Not strawmanning, steelmanning, as in building the strongest, most intelligent, most generous version of the argument you disagree with before trying to refute it. It is the mental equivalent of saying, if I am going to punch this idea in the face, it should at least be wearing armor and holding a weapon, not sitting in a high chair with applesauce on its forehead. Let us start with a refresher. Strawmanning is the act of misrepresenting someone's argument so you can knock it over easily. It is a cheap move, like bringing a squirt gun to a philosophy lecture and declaring victory because nobody wanted to get wet. Examples include, you support renewable energy, so you want us to live in caves and make candles out of tree sap? You believe in free markets, so you are fine with children selling organs on the street? You want stronger immigration policies, so you hate puppies and democracy? These are not rebuttals, they are pantomimes. They are designed to make the speaker feel smart and the opponent look ridiculous. Steelmanning flips the script. You say, let me state your argument in a way that is fair, complete, and maybe even better than how you stated it yourself. Then, and only then, will I explain why I still disagree. This is terrifying to people who treat disagreement as a war and not as a search for clarity. But rationality demands it. Why? Because if you can only defeat a cartoon version of an idea, you probably do not understand the real one. And if you cannot understand an argument, you have no business disagreeing with it. Let us try an example. Suppose someone says, we should raise the minimum wage. The strawman version would say, oh, so you want to bankrupt small businesses and replace the economy with hugs? The steelman version would say, you believe that raising the minimum wage will improve quality of life for low-income workers, reduce poverty, and stimulate consumer spending by increasing disposable income. You acknowledge potential downsides, but believe the net effect will be positive, especially for marginalized communities. Now we are talking. You have taken the idea seriously. You have shown intellectual generosity. You have demonstrated that you are not just trying to win, you are trying to understand. Now you can engage. You might still disagree. Maybe you think the economic risks outweigh the benefits. Maybe you believe targeted subsidies work better. But now you are arguing against the real position, not your emotional hand puppet of it. This makes your argument stronger, not weaker. It also makes you a better communicator, a better thinker, and significantly less exhausting to talk to at dinner parties. So why do people avoid Steelmanning? Because it is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit the other side is not entirely wrong. It means you must step into their shoes, and sometimes their shoes are not as crazy as you hoped. Steelmanning also takes effort. It is easier to fight a weak idea than a strong one. That is why most social media debates look like a battle between angry toddlers with Wi-Fi. But here is the secret. Steelmanning is not a gift you give the other person. It is a gift you give yourself. It improves your thinking. It refines your beliefs. It helps you spot holes in your own reasoning. And yes, it helps you argue better. Let us take another example. You are debating someone about nuclear energy. They say, "We should expand nuclear power." You hate this idea. You launch into your speech about Chernobyl and radioactive doom. But first, pause. Steelman it. The Steelman might be, you believe nuclear energy offers a low-carbon, high-output alternative to fossil fuels. You recognize the safety concerns but point to modern technology and rigorous safety protocols that have drastically reduced risks. You also highlight the urgency of reducing emissions and argue that nuclear energy is one of the few scalable tools we have available. Now, even if you still disagree, your counter-argument will sound like it came from someone who understands the issue, not someone who once read a scary headline and is still emotionally recovering from watching a documentary with ominous music. Steelmanning is especially useful when you are not sure what you believe. It is a great way to test your ideas. Try to argue the other side better than its actual defenders. If you can do that and still disagree, your position is more stable. If you start to waver, good. That is growth. That is intellectual honesty waving at you with jazz hands. Let us also acknowledge that Steelmanning requires intellectual empathy. You must be able to say, "I might be wrong. They might have a point. Let me find it." That is rare. That is hard. That is rational. People often think changing your mind is a defeat, but Steelmanning reframes it. Changing your mind after understanding someone else's point of view is not weak. It is one of the strongest things you can do. This also works in relationships. Your partner says, "You never listen to me." You could say, "So now I am a monster who ignores everything you say." Or you could Steelman, "You feel like when you express something important, I respond too quickly or dismissively, and that makes you feel unheard, even if that is not my intention." Suddenly, the argument shifts from attack to dialogue. You are not conceding, you are connecting. This rule also makes you a better reader, a better voter, a better thinker. If you see an opinion you hate, do not dismiss it. Try to Steelman it first. Find the smartest, fairest version. Then, if you still disagree, you know you are disagreeing with substance, not shadows. Let us talk about when Steelmanning backfires. Occasionally you Steelman someone's argument, and they look confused and say, "Yeah, that sounds better than what I was trying to say." That is fine. That is progress. Or worse, you Steelman, and it turns out the argument really was that dumb. That is fine too. At least now you know. At least you gave it a fair shot. At least you are not the person yelling into a void, punching imaginary enemies with slogans instead of reasons. Steelmanning does not mean agreeing. It means understanding. It means building the steel version of the argument, not the straw one. If it stands, great. If it breaks, you broke something real, not a caricature. So how do you practice it? Step 1. Listen carefully, not to respond, not to interrupt, just to understand. Step 2. Rephrase the other person's point in the strongest way you can. Step 3. Ask if that is a fair representation. If they say yes, good. If not, revise it. Step 4. Only then should you respond. That is rationality in action. Because this rule, like many others, is not about scoring points. It is about becoming someone whose thinking can survive scrutiny. Someone who does not just argue to win, but argues to understand. And if you ever feel tempted to strawman someone, just remember, you would not challenge someone to a sword fight and then sneak in with a Nerf bat. Or maybe you would. But that probably says more about your gym membership than your logic. Cached thoughts. Uncritically reused ideas. Imagine walking into your kitchen, opening a cabinet, and automatically pulling out a can labeled dinner. You do not check the contents. You do not read the label. You just eat it, every night, every situation, without a second thought. Now imagine doing that with your ideas. Welcome to the strange and slightly embarrassing world of cached thoughts. Ideas you did not generate yourself, have not questioned in years, if ever. But still pull out of mental storage like expired tuna you are too lazy to replace. A cached thought is a pre-packaged opinion, a default setting. Something you once heard, maybe from a parent, a teacher, a coworker, or someone with good lighting on a podcast, and your brain said, "Sure, that sounds like thinking," and filed it away under truth. Then years later, without blinking, you say it out loud, like you invented it. Money cannot buy happiness. Everything happens for a reason. Kids these days do not understand hard work. You need 8 glasses of water a day, or you will turn into a cactus. You do not question it. You just repeat it. It feels familiar. It feels correct. It has been sitting on your mental shelf for so long that dust has begun forming small philosophical ecosystems around it. This is how the brain saves time. It automates. It shortcuts. But what it saves in speed, it often loses in accuracy. Cached thoughts are mental fast food, quick, convenient, and suspiciously beige in the middle. Let us dig into where these ideas come from. Cached thoughts usually start off as borrowed wisdom. Someone says something with confidence. You are in no position to argue, so you nod. Your brain says, "Good enough for now," and drops it into storage. Later, when you are faced with a similar situation, your brain reaches into that storage and tosses the thought back up to your mouth before you have time to evaluate it. This happens constantly. You hear someone say, "The customer is always right." You think, "Sure." Later, when a customer throws a shoe at you because the muffins are not gluten-free enough, that same phrase floats up again, unchallenged, like a ghost of retail logic past. Or someone tells you, "Follow your heart." So you do. Straight into a career in interpretive dance, 6 weeks of financial regret, and a surprising amount of glitter-related injuries. The point is not that all cached thoughts are wrong. Some are fine. Some are even helpful. The problem is when you stop evaluating them, when you use them reflexively instead of reflectively. Let us take a classic. Nice guys finish last. On the surface, this sounds like hard-earned life experience. But scratch deeper. What does that even mean? What counts as nice? What counts as finishing? And are we talking about dating, job promotions, or an actual race where someone held the door open too long and missed their shot at gold? You see the problem. Cached thoughts are slogans, not arguments. They rarely come with nuance. They do not invite questions. They just sit there, smug and unexamined. Now, why does the brain love these things? Because original thought is expensive. It takes energy, attention, time. Every time you face a problem, you could analyze it from scratch, or you could reach for something that worked once or seemed clever or came with a free infographic. So the brain takes the lazy option, and most of the time, that is fine. You do not want to reinvent how to tie your shoes every morning, but when the stakes are high, deciding what you believe, how to vote, how to treat people, how to plan your life, you might want to pause before parroting. Let us look at how cached thoughts shape opinions. Someone says, "We need more discipline in schools." That sounds reasonable. You have heard it before. It activates some nostalgic sense of order. But what does it mean in practice? More testing, more detentions, replacing math class with boot camp? Unless you question it, you will keep applying that same fuzzy thought to wildly different contexts, like trying to solve every problem in your house with duct tape and a raised eyebrow. Cached thoughts also infect morality. Take the idea. Violence never solves anything. Lovely phrase. Full of idealism, also historically inaccurate. Ask any war. Ask the invention of locks. Ask the last time someone tried to break into a house and met a large dog with unresolved emotional issues. The better version is, violence has costs. It should be a last resort. But that requires thinking, nuance, effort. Cached thoughts do not like that. They prefer sweeping generalizations and bumper sticker wisdom. Now let us talk about how to spot cached thoughts. The easiest clue? If you hear yourself say something and then feel mentally blank, no details, no reasoning, just a weird internal shrug, you have probably just deployed a cached thought. Try this experiment. Ask yourself, when did I first hear this? Do I know why I believe it? Can I argue both for and against it? Does it actually apply here? If you cannot answer those, your thought has been living rent-free in your brain for years and has not even cleaned the metaphorical bathroom. Another clue is emotional smoothness. Cached thoughts feel good to say, they roll off the tongue, they end conversations instead of opening them. That is why they are popular. They act like intellectual full stops. Someone says, everything happens for a reason. That may be comforting, but is it true? Is there evidence? Is it testable? Or is it just the idea you reach for when something awful happens and you want to avoid sitting in silence with the horror of randomness? Cached thoughts are not just slogans. They show up in belief systems. Ideas like, people are basically good, or you can be anything if you work hard, or the system is rigged against us, might all contain some truth, but they are often used as shields against deeper questions. Worse, they often conflict, and the brain does not care. You might believe never judge a book by its cover, and also first impressions matter. You might believe love is all you need, and also trust must be earned. You do not notice the contradiction because each one lives in its own cached folder, never bumping into the others, like guests at a party you host, but never really talk to. Let us take this to the rationality level. Rationality says, update your thoughts, review them, challenge them. Do not just rely on the old ones because they are convenient. Cached thoughts are the default. Rationality is the upgrade. So how do you break the habit? Step 1. Notice the pattern. When you hear yourself repeating something that sounds suspiciously like a fridge magnet, pause. That is a red flag. Step 2. Ask questions. Where did this come from? Who benefits if I believe this? What evidence supports it? Has it ever failed me? Step 3. Replace it with something fresher. Not necessarily opposite, just better, more accurate, more detailed. Something you have thought through. For example, instead of hard work always pays off, maybe say, hard work improves your odds, but external factors matter too. Is that less inspiring? Sure, but it is also less likely to leave you sobbing into your third rejection email, wondering if the universe is gaslighting you. You can even build your own cache, but consciously. Fill it with updated models, flexible principles, ideas that invite curiosity instead of shutting it down. And yes, sometimes you will still default to the old slogans. That is fine. You are human. But the goal is not to eliminate cached thoughts. It is to notice them, question them, keep your brain's pantry clean, because stale thoughts are like stale cereal. You only notice how bad they are after you have already poured the milk, and by then, it is too late. So go ahead, audit your mental cupboard, toss out the expired wisdom, keep the stuff that still holds up, and maybe, just maybe, stop telling people to live every day like it is their last. Because if that were true, everyone would be panic-eating cheesecake and ignoring their inbox, which to be fair is already half of what people do on Mondays. Halo effect. One good trait does not equal all good traits. You meet someone new. They are charming. Their handshake is firm but not creepy. Their shoes are clean. Their voice sounds like they could narrate a nature documentary while assembling IKEA furniture blindfolded. Within 3 minutes, your brain has quietly filed them under smart, trustworthy, probably smells like eucalyptus. You do not know much about them, but you feel like you do. Congratulations. You have just experienced the halo effect, the delightful little glitch in your reasoning system where one good trait gets exaggerated into a full-blown personality profile. All because your brain loves shortcuts, hates ambiguity, and thinks glowing first impressions are the same thing as truth. Let us start with the basics. The halo effect is when you assume someone's overall character based on a single positive attribute. They are attractive, so they must also be kind. They are eloquent, so they must be smart. They have an expensive watch, so they must be successful and emotionally available. Spoiler: no, they are not. That watch is leased, and they cried during a networking event last Tuesday. This phenomenon works in reverse too. Someone wears socks with sandals, and suddenly your brain decides they are untrustworthy, slow, and possibly dangerous around electronics. This is not rational. It is emotional shorthand pretending to be logic. Let us look at how this happens in daily life. You watch a TED Talk. The speaker is confident, articulate, and has good posture. They click their slides like they are launching missiles made of wisdom. You do not just think, "This is a good speaker." You think, "This person probably makes ethical investments, composts, and knows how to fix a marriage with gentle eye contact." They might. Or they might scream at baristas and steal forks from hotel restaurants. You do not know. You just feel like you do. That is the halo effect doing backflips behind your prefrontal cortex. It gets worse. The halo effect does not just apply to people. It also shows up in products, brands, ideas, and even food. You see a sleek, minimalist website. You assume the app will be functional. You buy a wine bottle with a nice label and assume it will taste like class and grapes with a PhD. You hear that someone went to an Ivy League school and you assume they understand climate policy and parallel parking. You buy a laptop because the commercial made you cry and then feel inspired. Never mind the overheating. Never mind the customer service department that only answers emails in Morse code. The glow of that emotional first impression spills into every other feature like spilled glitter in a craft store. This is irrational, but it is consistent. Let us talk about why the halo effect happens. Humans do not like complexity. Your brain would rather make quick judgments than sit around doing a character analysis. So it grabs whatever information it has, slaps a label on it, and moves on. It is mental efficiency disguised as insight. The first impression becomes the blueprint. If it is good, you fill in the gaps with praise. If it is bad, you fill in the gaps with criticism. Psychologists call this attribute substitution. When you are asked to evaluate something complicated, like someone's trustworthiness, you replace it with something easier, like their smile, their voice, or whether they blink at the right frequency. The halo effect is a form of cognitive laziness, but your brain calls it being intuitive. Now let us examine how this messes up decision-making. Suppose you are hiring someone. One candidate walks in looking like they were styled by a motivational Pinterest board. They smile. They sit up straight. They say your name just the right number of times. Your brain says, hire them. They are clearly perfect. You have not even looked at their resume. For all you know, they once burned down a printer out of spite. Meanwhile, the other candidate is nervous, fumbles the coffee cup, and says, too many times. Your brain silently exiles them from consideration. Later, you find out they built an AI model in their spare time, donate to animal shelters, and make better spreadsheets than you have ever dreamed of. The halo effect creates false confidence. It makes you trust people who do not deserve it and doubt people who might be quietly amazing. It is especially dangerous in leadership. Charisma gets mistaken for competence. Politicians who look good in a suit and deliver a punchy speech get treated like geniuses. Meanwhile, the policy wonks who understand the numbers but speak like sleepwalking librarians get ignored. You are not judging their skills. You are judging the vibe and assuming everything else matches. You can see the halo effect in celebrity culture too. A famous actor gives an interview about their skincare routine, and suddenly people want their opinion on foreign policy, economics, and the ethics of artificial intelligence. Or someone is rich, so we assume they must be wise. Never mind that their wealth came from selling novelty fidget cubes shaped like reptiles. Their money sparkles. The halo effect fills in the blanks. This happens in education as well. A student who answers confidently gets higher grades. A student who hesitates, even if correct, gets marked down. Teachers are human. They are influenced by presence, tone, and posture. Confidence looks like competence, even when it is not. Let us not forget romantic relationships. You meet someone on a good hair day. They smell nice. They quote a book you like. The halo effect kicks in. You ignore the weird text messages, the casual disregard for boundaries, and the fact that they do not believe in umbrellas. You convince yourself they are a catch. You project your ideal onto them. Months later, you realize you have been dating a sentient cologne bottle with access to Wikipedia. So how do you defend yourself? Step 1. Separate the traits. When someone seems smart, ask yourself, what exactly makes me think that? Is it their vocabulary or their insights? When someone seems trustworthy, ask, based on what evidence? Step 2. Actively search for disconfirming traits. If someone appears perfect, look closer. Nobody is perfect. The halo effect hides flaws. Rationality finds them and evaluates whether they matter. Step 3. Make decisions using multiple data points. If you are hiring, do not rely on the interview alone. Use tests. Use work samples. If you are dating, observe how they treat waitstaff, animals, and how they behave when the Wi-Fi goes down. Step 4. Watch for emotional weight. If a person, product, or idea feels too good to be true right away, you might be swimming in a halo. Let us apply this to ideas and arguments. Just because an argument sounds eloquent does not mean it is valid. Just because it is coming from someone you admire does not mean it holds up. Evaluate each claim on its own merit. If someone you like says something, pause and ask, would I still agree if someone I dislike said this? That is how you know you are evaluating the territory, not the halo around the messenger. Even brands use this against you. Apple, Tesla, Patagonia. These brands have crafted halos so powerful that people forgive them for design flaws, delays, and questionable manufacturing decisions. The brand is associated with innovation, style, or ethics, and that glow covers everything else like a cozy lie made of cotton. Rationality demands you scrape off that glow and check what is underneath. It might still be good, but now you know it is good, not just feels good. Now, to be clear, the halo effect is not always malicious. It is not always a scam. Sometimes the person really is as capable as they seem. Sometimes the product is just as excellent as the packaging suggests, but you cannot know that until you separate the trait from the hype. The halo effect is not just about misjudging others. It is also about misjudging yourself. Maybe you are good at writing, so you assume you are also a great speaker. Or you are good at math, so you think you understand politics. Or you are great at organizing spreadsheets, so clearly you are ready to manage 12 people and a goat on a deadline. It is a sneaky ego trap. You start believing your own press. So next time you find yourself overly impressed with someone, or yourself, take a breath. Ask, what do I actually know about this person? What have they demonstrated? Am I seeing the full picture, or just basking in a spotlight of my own projections? And if you are ever unsure whether you are being dazzled by a halo, just ask, would I still feel this way if they were wearing socks with sandals and eating string cheese with a fork? If the answer is no, you might want to rethink your judgment. Because the only thing worse than falling for the halo effect is finding out the angel you trusted is just a raccoon with good lighting and a rented tuxedo. Confirmation bias. We see what we want to see. You are scrolling through social media, sipping something with caffeine and moral superiority when you spot a headline. It agrees with your beliefs. It validates your worldview. It makes you feel smart and righteous. You do not read the article. You click share. You say, exactly. You move on. Now pause. What just happened? You, dear reader, have just fed one of the most ancient and persistent bugs in human reasoning. Confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms what you already believe, while ignoring, forgetting, or aggressively side-eyeing anything that challenges it. In other words, you love being right, even when you are not. Let us start with a definition that does not sound like a software update. Confirmation bias is when your brain acts like your personal PR team, filtering reality so that everything supports your pre-approved narrative. If you believe cats are evil masterminds, you will notice every stare, every knocked-over glass, every 3 a.m. hallway sprint. You will not notice the snuggles, the cuddles, the moments of quiet purring. You are too busy compiling your case for feline world domination. This is not just about cats. This is about everything. You believe left-handed people are more creative. You remember the 2 artists you met who were left-handed. You forget your left-handed cousin who eats beige food and thinks jazz is just noise. Your friend believes Mercury in retrograde ruins everything. When their Zoom call drops, they whisper, "I knew it." When everything works fine, they say, "That was luck. Retrograde was clearly distracted." This is how confirmation bias works. It does not just shape what you believe. It shapes what you see, what you remember, what you search for, and, most dangerously, what you never notice at all. Let us walk through some examples. Imagine you are convinced your boss hates you. Every time they give you critical feedback, you nod solemnly. Proof, you think. Every time they compliment you, you assume they are being sarcastic or trying to soften the blow for later. You interpret neutral emails as passive aggression. You read tone into their Slack messages. You become a detective in your own tragic sitcom. Your bias is not just interpreting reality, it is constructing it. Or say you believe sugar is poison. You read articles about its dangers. You ignore contradictory studies. You share infographics with alarming fonts and skull icons. When someone points out that the human body needs glucose to function, you say, "Sure, but not refined glucose," and pivot to talking about ancient grains and the benefits of licking Himalayan salt blocks. What you are doing is not research. It is reassurance. Your brain is not a scientist. It is a lawyer. It does not want truth. It wants a win. This problem is not new. It has been studied in psychology for decades. The first experiments showed that people given both supporting and opposing evidence for a topic would rate the evidence they agreed with as stronger, even when the arguments were matched in quality. People read what they agree with more carefully. They remember it longer. They treat it like gospel. Everything else? They skim it like a terms of service agreement and toss it into the cognitive recycling bin. Confirmation bias also thrives in search engines. If you search, "Are vaccines dangerous?" you will find articles saying yes. If you search, "Why vaccines are safe?" you will find articles saying no. Your results are shaped by your wording. So if you already have a belief, the internet is more than happy to offer you a buffet of agreement with side dishes of echo chamber seasoning. That is why people can live in completely different informational universes. One person sees evidence of corruption everywhere. Another sees a system mostly working. They are not seeing the same facts. They are seeing what they want to see. This also affects memory. You remember the evidence that confirms your beliefs. You forget or dismiss the evidence that contradicts it. Your brain becomes a selective librarian, shelving only the books that flatter your opinions and setting fire to the rest. Confirmation bias makes you feel stable, confident, but it also makes you wrong more often than you realize. It is why political debates rarely change minds. People do not go into them looking to learn. They go in looking to reinforce. They are not listening. They are waiting for the other person to stop talking so they can resume preaching. It is why conspiracy theories thrive. Once someone believes in one, every new piece of data is twisted to fit. Any contradiction is seen as part of the cover-up. Any lack of evidence is proof of how deep the conspiracy goes. You cannot win that game. You cannot even play it. The rules are rigged. So what does rationality ask you to do? It asks you to look for disconfirmation, to actively seek out evidence that you are wrong, not just tolerate it. Search for it. That is hard. It feels unnatural, but it is the only way to build beliefs that are more than just well-dressed guesses. This is called a falsifiability mindset. It means asking, what would prove me wrong, and meaning it. Not just saying it to sound reasonable while mentally preparing your counter-argument. It also means reading things you disagree with. Not to hate read, not to screenshot and mock, but to understand. If you believe a policy is good, read a well-reasoned critique of it. If you believe a person is bad, read their best defense, not their worst moments amplified by someone who already dislikes them. If you believe something strongly, pause and ask, why? Where did this belief come from? Have I ever questioned it? What evidence would change my mind? If your answer is, nothing could change my mind, you are not holding a belief. You are holding a security blanket. Now let us be clear. Being open to disconfirmation does not mean believing nothing. It means your beliefs earn their place. They are not just squatting in your brain because they arrived early and got comfy. Confirmation bias also shows up in group dynamics. Ever notice how a team can spiral into bad decisions because everyone keeps agreeing? That is not consensus. That is groupthink, fueled by confirmation bias. Nobody wants to be the buzzkill who says, hey, maybe our buy 10,000 keychains and become viral strategy needs more research. In those moments, the most valuable person in the room is not the one who nods along. It is the one who says, what are we missing? Confirmation bias also explains why some people become more extreme over time. They keep filtering their input. They surround themselves with people who agree. They reinforce their beliefs in a feedback loop so tight it could power a blender. Eventually, they are no longer thinking. They are recycling. To avoid that fate, you need intellectual humility. You need to say, I might be wrong, not as a performance, as a sincere position. That is how you grow. That is how you get better at seeing reality instead of just your reflection in it. So how do you fight confirmation bias? Step 1. Acknowledge it exists. You are not special. You are not immune. You are a biased reasoning machine pretending to be a neutral detective. Step 2. Make it a habit to seek disagreement. Ask your smartest friend who disagrees with you to explain their position. Listen, do not interrupt. Try to understand, not to convert, not to destroy, just understand. Step 3. Practice Steelmanning, which we already discussed. Present the best version of the opposing view. Make it stronger than its actual defenders. Then see if your belief still holds up. Step 4. Change your mind publicly. Normalize it. Do not be the person who clings to a belief just because it has been in their Twitter bio since 2014. Be the person who says, I used to think that. Then I read something better. Confirmation bias is not a sign that you are stupid. It is a sign that you are human. But being human does not mean being intellectually lazy. It means recognizing your flaws, and then doing better anyway. So the next time you find yourself nodding a little too quickly, liking something a little too eagerly, or rejecting a counterpoint before you even hear it, pause. Ask yourself, do I want to be right, or do I want to know? Because one of those builds confidence. The other builds wisdom. And wisdom, unlike confirmation bias, will never tell you that buying that fourth air fryer was a sound investment, no matter how many 5-star reviews said life-changing.